To order tonight's meeting.
And push whenever you want to talk.
So tonight, September 14th is, I'm not sure what meeting that is this year, but we'll start with a call to order. And we recognize that with the land acknowledgement, which I will read. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederation Villages of Lijan Tribe. The acknowledgement and genocide that took place on these lands we acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must take strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Albany tribe. We thank them for their contributions which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. Second thing on the agenda is the approval of the meetings of the last meeting, which was June 8th. Does anyone have any, I guess we want to call the vote on that?
I can do a roll call.
Yeah.
Chang Frank?
Here.
Chin?
Here.
Chair Kent? Or no, sorry, Mr. Martin?
Here.
OG?
Here.
And now Chair Kent.
Here. Sorry, I went out of order there.
Yeah,
I'm rusty. Sorry.
I thought we were doing.
Yeah, call to order, roll call, land acknowledgement. All right. It works, I think. We did it. Now approval of minutes. You want to call that?
Do another roll call. Chang Frank?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, motion.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. A motion, anyone want to move to approve the minutes?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the minutes from the June meeting.
I second it.
Perfect. Okay, Chang Frank?
Yes.
Commissioner Chin?
Yes.
Commissioner Martin?
Abstain because I wasn't there.
Commissioner OG?
Yes.
Chair Kent?
Yes.
That is an approval of the minutes.
Now we have a moment of public comment. This is for items that are not on the agenda. So if you'd like to say something to the commission that is not on the agenda, you can save your comment. If you have something on the agenda, save that until the agenda item is up. But otherwise, the floor is open for any comment that you'd like to give to the commission. We have the floor in front of us and then online too.
I'm not seeing any hands raised on Zoom.
Anyone in front of us would like to say anything to the commission? No. All right. Yes. We'll move on to announcements. Any staff and commissioners have any announcements? We haven't met for 3 months here.
Yeah, we have several announcements. First, we have Jeff Bond,
Great.
Community Development Director.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jeff Bond, Community Development Director. Thank you for the opportunity to make a couple of brief announcements related to the street tree management plan, specifically the second phase of the street tree management plan. First of all, as you know, we kicked off a request for proposals process with the Commission a few months ago, and we've completed that process. And thanks in large part to the participation of Commissioner Kent, we did select a consultant that would be Hort Science. We interviewed several other firms as well during that process. That selection was approved by the City Council at their meeting on September 5th. And we will be doing, the council authorized the execution of the contract, and we'll be finalizing that contract over the next couple of weeks. That first announcement leads to the second part of my announcement, which is that most likely on October 16th, we will be having a kickoff study session with the City Council on the street tree management plan. And this is an emerging practice that we've done on a couple of other things, most recently with the Albany Hill work, where just a few weeks ago, the City Council had a study session on that. We have a few other plans that we're working on in the Community Development Department that will be doing the same thing. which is basically giving the city council a chance to provide some input at the beginning of the process, rather than at the end after everything is kind of at least half baked or fully baked. And this council in particular appreciates that opportunity. So as I mentioned, our plan is to bring that to council on October 16th. That could change, so stay tuned. We'll keep you informed on that. And that our expectation is that soon after that, we would bring it back to this commission to lead the plan preparation process from there on. We certainly recognize the direction and feedback that the commission has already given us, notably the importance of developing a shared vision with stakeholders in the community, and also the importance of tree selection and aesthetics in terms of the urban design and function of the community. So those will be themes that I just want to acknowledge we heard, and you'll hopefully be seen work towards that achieve those objectives as part of the ongoing plan preparation process. So thank you very much for the chance to make the announcement, and if there are any brief questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
I have a question. Thanks, Jeff. I have a question. There was a June community survey related to, it just seemed like a really quick survey. Is that sort of apart from what the consultants will do in terms of public outreach?
Yes, we just wanted to, it's a kind of a way of sort of building a little bit of information and building some awareness of the preparation of the plan and getting people who might be interested so that we can engage them from the beginning. I don't have any results to announce, and we can certainly do that when we have this more formally on the agenda. But it's not intended to be anything definitive. It's just, a point of departure so that we get a sense of where the community is, and hopefully gives us a little bit of a running start in the preparation of the plan.
Okay, thanks.
Then I had a question. I think you said the tree plan is going to come before this commission before too long, after it goes before the city council. Is the eucalyptus project on Albany Hill, which had a session before the city council a week or so ago, is that also going to come before this commission in the near future?
I could maybe address that. Yes, I think the plan is that we kicked it off with the study session, and then would come through this commission like all the other plans.
Thanks.
I don't have a schedule with that right now.
All right.
Any other questions? Jeff?
I have an announcement. I don't have a question.
Jeff, is the special meeting with city council, is that on a standard city council session night?
Yes, it is. Thank you for that question. I should explain. It usually starts at 6 o'clock, and it's usually about an hour long. We would, the consultant will make a brief presentation, staff and consultant will make a brief presentation, certainly take public comment. And then we're really looking for feedback from the council of, hey, we like what you're doing, or we think you ought to do this, push this a different way. So we want to leave a little bit of time for council members individually to give us some direction. And that almost always starts at 6 o'clock, and it usually wraps up by 7 o'clock so they can get to their regular business.
Thanks. Thank you. Other agenda or announcements?
Just have an announcement.
Okay, sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I have a couple of announcements. Particularly, we have two new staff members in Public Works. The long-awaited Parks Project Manager is finally here. We have Andre Sterling. You'll hear from him later today. He comes from New York City Parks, where he was a senior project manager. He's also an Albany High graduate, so he's sort of coming home, and we're very happy to have him here. He has both experience in park projects, which you'll hear about tonight, but he also has experience in building projects, and that's really the niche we were looking for this person. So we're very excited to have him on board, and you'll see a lot of him in the coming months. The next person we have is Natasha Gallatin. You might recognize Natasha from previous presentations. She's just finishing up a Civic Sparks Fellowship with the Community Development Department, and she helped develop the RFP for the street tree management plan, helped guide the inventory that we recently completed. And as she's plotting her next step to conquer the world, she just agreed to come on as a temporary part-time employee to help us with the program side of the street tree program. So as we're developing the management plan, we want to develop our program, particularly in the areas of public outreach, communication, and so forth. So we're hoping that this will be a nice kind of parallel path that we'll be on. And then my last announcement, let me see if I can. So next Tuesday, we have a project going on in Public Works to do a streetlight evaluation, and that's been something the community's been asking for a very long time, ever since I've been here. And on Tuesday, we are going to have a workshop. It's going to be a combination of sort of a lighting 101, and then there'll be a tour where we have some lights set up at various points where you can see different lighting levels, intensities of color and whatnot. So it's be a very interactive presentation. We have our consultant, Clanton Associates, would be out running the project, as well as we'll have a number of people from Public Works. So under construction alerts in Public Works, we have information about the meeting, the start times, the locations at the senior center starts at 6 o'clock and I'll go through 9. We will have some refreshments, so you don't. It's a long commitment, and we understand that, but so we'll give you a little bit of food. There's also some information on it. We have our first technical memo on about the project, which is an existing conditions report, and so that's an interesting thing to look at and see lighting levels around the city. So we're hoping all that can make it can attend.
And we can see this report. This is under construction alerts.
Yes. So under construction alerts, public, let's see if I can scroll up here. Under the Public Works page, we have construction alerts, and then we have, for all the projects we have going on, we have these drop-down menus where it has basically the entire history of the project. This isn't a construction project right now, but it kind of fits in a way of communicating.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I have a few announcements as well. Want to get involved in Albany Parks? Cleanup days are back. Save the date for October 7th, 2023 at Ocean View Park. For more information, you can call the Community Center at 510-524-9283. Yes, we're local. Albany Local Week is back, September 18th through the 24th. Celebrate the amazing businesses, parks, attractions, and uniqueness of our city for one entire week. September 21st, the Best of Albany Awards Gala will be held at the Belmont Village. That's at 1100 San Pablo Avenue. It will be from 6 to 8 p.m. There was also an announcement at the city council meeting about the position for the city's Recreation and Community Services Director. Sid, who was acting as the interim director, was voted unanimously to be the city's Recreation and Community Service Director. So we are happy to have him in that position. Concert in the Park, join the community in celebrating Albany's 115th anniversary of incorporation at our Wednesday night concert in the park, September 20th from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. There will be kids' activities, free desserts, bike parking, brown cap organic soft serve for sale, and the band Pride and Joy, who will be performing timeless pop and soul music. And lastly, Recreation and Community Services has started to formulate a plan for the pilot volleyball program at Memorial Park Tennis Courts. This includes purchasing the portable nets recommended by our Pros Flex Court Subcommittee.
Yay. To say, I'm actually really excited that for the new hires. That's really exciting, and I know that pickleball and other plans will be coming up, but this is the reason, we've been waiting for Andre for a lot of these projects to happen, so congratulations. Great to have an Albany local native. I just wanted to make another announcement similar to the volleyball. If people have driven by Memorial Park, the basketball courts are coming back up. So I just wanted to thank Superintendent Wells, who a couple years ago, there was a group of kids who came before the commission and city council to ask for the basketballs that were removed for the portables to be reinstalled. And he made good on his promise, and he also, even in between that time, he had installed some temporary basketball hoops for the high schoolers. So I want to really appreciate him for making that reinstallation happen very quickly.
Thank you. Any more announcements? That's it? How about from the board? Okay. Then we'll move on to presentations, starting off with the natural area update.
Yes, so Isabel, why don't you come up? Unfortunately, Margot Cunningham, who supervises Isabel, can't be here tonight, so I'm going to try to do a introduction. So Isabel is our first habitat restoration intern. So this is a program, if you recall, was funded by a Coastal Conservancy grant that we received. So you're going to hear more about what she did for her grant program. And the idea here is that so her term is ending, we have a new intern starting, and so we have 3 years of interns, and the idea is that each intern will be doing something meaningful on Albany Hill that can build on each other and really kind of be a real benefit for both Albany Hill and the community. And my hope is that while this is grant funded, we hope that this will be a success, that we can then turn it into a long-term internship program that helps both young folks just starting out in their careers, as well as we get some good benefit out of it. So with that, Isabel, let me get the let's see. Did I do that right? Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Okay, hold on. All right.
Start just on the previous slide. Thank you.
There you go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Isabel. Like Mark said, I've been the intern over the summer working under Margot, the Natural Areas Coordinator. And yeah, tonight I'll just be presenting on what I've learned, what projects I've been working on over the summer, and some of my takeaways from my internship experience. So there's me collecting some seeds up on Albany Hill. That's one of my favorite activities that we did. We also did a lot of invasive plant weeding and other integrated pest management strategies to control the invasive plants on Albany Hill. We also mapped a lot of native plants. This helps us to understand changes over time with native plant populations on the hill. I also had the opportunity to create educational materials and survey park users, which I'll talk more about in the following slides. Yeah, so the first project I started working on was a community survey. Some of you may have seen it. It was in one of the newsletters, and it's been posted throughout the hill on QR codes. So it's still open until the end of October. If anyone's interested in filling it out, you could scan that code. But the aim of the survey was to find out who's using the hill and why, and that information will hopefully inform future outreach that Margot and the Public Works Department will do. Part of the survey was also to introduce the Eucalyptus Project to the public and sort of get a feel for how people, what their opinions are on the project as well. And so we're getting data on that still being analyzed, but more to come on that. And thirdly, to find out what the community would like to see more of on the Hill, which was really interesting for me. And some of the feedback we got was more educational materials. So that's something I focused on in my second project. So the bulk of my internship I spent creating this field guide, digital field guide, of some of the native plants and animals at Albany Hill. So this includes photos, descriptions, information, and identification tips for several native species that you can find there. It's also aims to serve to be an educational resource for the public, to learn more about native plants, animals, how to even incorporate them into their own backyards, participate in citizen science by making their own observations. And I also included not just natural history, but also sort of a cultural history of the hill in there. And so I had the opportunity to collaborate with Sogorea Land Trust members to try and include Chochenyo names, as well as some cultural information about some significant sites on the hill. And so the project is almost done. It's in its final stages now. We're just waiting on some stakeholder feedback, but it should be up and running soon. So you can keep an eye out for that. Should be signposted throughout the hill, should be on a newsletter, and also on the Albany Hill website under the Public Works page. So keep an eye out for that. Here's just a little sneak peek at what some of the pages look like for the guide. I think it's really fun. People will be able to sort of do a scavenger hunt with some of the native plants on the hill. So you can click on the pictures of the species, and it will take you to locations where Margot and I mapped native plants. So that'll be a fun activity that the public can do. And we're also trying to include common names, scientific names, and indigenous names for these plants, as well as cultural uses and identification tips, etc. And yeah, just some takeaways that I've gotten from this internship is that under Margot, I've learned a lot about native plants and animals. She's, I would say, an expert on, the local environment and ecosystem, so I've really appreciated working under her. I've gotten a lot of information. I also got the opportunity to conduct community outreach, which will inform planning, which was really, really awesome, and create educational materials for public use. And above all, I got my first sort of professional experience in the environmental public sector out of school, which is something that I was really interested in getting, and this has been really helpful for me to get a sort of step in and see what it's like to work for a local government. And it's informed my current career path, and I'm going to continue working in the public sector and environmental work. So yeah, just I'm really grateful for the opportunity. Really enjoyed working with everyone at the Public Works Department. And that's it. I have another slide just for any questions people might have for me, but that wraps it up.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Question?
Yeah, I had a question. First of all, thank you so much. And it sounds like you got a lot of work done in a short amount of time. For the public, when does the survey close for the Albany Hill survey?
The survey is set to close for October 31st. Yeah.
I have a question for the scavenger hunt. So,
Yes.
how will people hear about this? Like, are you communicating with the local schools? Pretty exciting. I have an 8-year-old daughter who would probably love doing that.
Yeah, it's not, so the scavenger hunt isn't like officially sort of its own thing that I've organized. It's more part of the guide that someone could do if they wanted to. But Margot has been in contact with local school teachers at the Albany High, I believe, and they're really interested in the guide. I know that they're trying to incorporate more Indigenous knowledge into their curriculum. But in terms of outreach about the survey, it'll be in the newsletter, it'll be on the website, and it'll also be posted throughout Albany Hill.
All right, thank you.
Are there any rare or endangered plants up there?
There are some really interesting rare native species. We have Bowlander's golden aster, which was actually pictured on the previous slide. Margot's definitely one to ask, would have a more expansive answer to give you, but there are some very rare plants that we've been mapping that only occur in Albany Hill and then some other like higher elevation areas in the bay. And so we actually got to map that and add that to like a rare native plant database through CalFlora. But yeah, Albany Hill is a really interesting location because it has a really high diversity of native plants and you can find a lot of cool plants that you wouldn't be able to find elsewhere nearby.
Well, I guess the concern is if you're putting on a database, I guess everybody knows where these rare
Locations.
endangered plants are now.
Sure. I mean, that's true, and that is a concern we had. We do have in the guide, we ask people to be respectful of the plants and to not, take them. Also, we haven't included many that are off, like significantly off trail, so it would be, within the confines of where people can go to discourage people going off trail and contributing to erosion or things like that.
Thank you. Should we open up to the public for comment on this? Is this an item that the public comments on?
I think that's typically how
Yeah.
we would do it.
Is anyone from the public would like to comment? Oh, please come up to the.
Sorry, you have to come up to the microphone over
You'll
there
have to,
for public comment.
You'll step aside.
People at home can hear.
Nobody can hear you on the, yeah, right.
Hi. My question was whether you encountered any mammals in your adventures on Albany Hill.
Mammals, yes. Deer, there are quite a few deer. And so the guide doesn't just have plants, it does have native animals as well. Deer are not on there. We have insects and birds, but I should mention this is something important that the hope is that future interns will contribute to this guide and it'll grow and to include more species and be sort of a working project. So hopefully we'll get some mammals in there too. Yeah.
Any more questions? Anyone online? No one online. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it's very interesting. The next presentation, item 5.2, Proposition 68 Measure M funded project update. We get to see Andre in action. Big hype. Get it.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Andre Sterling, the new project manager at Public Works. So we're going to update you this evening on our Prop 68 projects. I think some have been long awaited. So, first of all, we have 5 different sites, actually 7 projects that we're going to be working on in various phases. Right now, we're going to focus on 3 sites, and that's 4 projects. So Memorial Park, Ocean View Park, and Pierce Street Park. So our first one is Ocean View Park, and that has to do with a conversion of 1 tennis court to 4 pickleball courts. So that's an excerpt from the master plan that was adopted in 2022. We can go to the next slide. So there's the project scope, and then we'll talk a little bit more about each of these items in the next slide. So first, we're going to resurface the entire court, including the practice area. We're going to level the asphalt that's near the fence line as well in the surrounding area. That includes crack filling or filling the cracks there on the surface, doing a leveling course, and then an acrylic coat. We're going to stripe the tennis court, 1 tennis court, 4 pickleball courts. So that involves new tennis posts and net, new permanent pickleball posts and nets for those 4 courts. We're going to install a 4-foot chain link fence separating east to west the pickleball courts and then the tennis courts north to south. New windscreen and new benches. Right now we have 2 benches for seating area, but we're going to have 8. So for those between matches, they can have a place to sit. We're installing padding for the light posts as well for extra safety. We'll explain that a little more coming up. We'll trim all the vegetation and the trees around the fence line. Of course, we're upgrading the lighting there from metal halide to LED lamps. So we can take a look at the conceptual layout. So something we want to mention that since this is a conversion, there's only a finite amount of space that we can work with. It's a space of 120 feet by 120 feet. So we have the 4 pickleball courts there towards the east of the tennis court. And we have, obviously we want to construct this based on ASBA standards as well. So even based on the amount of space that we have, that one dimension there between the pickleball courts, we had to cut 2 feet. I think the standard is 10 feet, but we needed those 2 feet somewhere. So we wanted to maintain the top dimension. If you see that, we can go to the next couple slides. Off of that fence line, the standard to the sideline, the minimum is 5 feet, but we want a little extra space off of the post, the light post there as well. Another reason why we have the padding, because that's the minimum dimension that we can have there. So 5 feet between that post and the sideline at the top pickleball court. So I think there was a suggestion that was made regarding painting some pickleball courts or the lines on the permanent tennis ball or tennis court. One issue with that is we would have to take into consideration possibly handicapped or wheelchair play as well. And with that comes more spacing along the sideline and baseline. And if we look at the next slide, we can basically see that, basically, if you see in the top right-hand corner, it takes up the space of the tennis court. So we would have to consult with our ADA consultant on that. And obviously we want to make everyone happy, so we would need to get some feedback from our tennis playing community as well. So that's going to involve some more planning, and that will take time before we would decide on adding the pickleball court lines there on the permanent tennis court. We also have elevations there showing the pickleball net. That's really more so for the contractor. There's different standards for that net compared to a tennis court net. So I think on the next slide you'll see the spacing there that we're talking about. So that's the existing condition right now. So with the 4 pickleball courts, we're going to lose maybe 3 feet off of that sideline. So that puts us, again, about 5 feet off of the post. So we're going to have padding there. But that's the minimum standard dimension that we can have there for construction. So we can't move it any more beyond that to gain more space on the other end of the area. You'll see in the next slide as well, it's the same for the tennis court. 12 foot is the standard off of the sideline. So again, we're going to have, so this isn't really going to move much, but we're going to have additional padding there for the light posts to avoid any trip hazards and safety issues for the players there. So our next slide is there's a requirement for Prop 68 projects, signage requirement. So this would be displayed for the duration of construction along with 4 years after the projects are completed. So each site that's funded by Prop 68 will have this sign displayed. I think our next slide is our schedule. So this is our tentative schedule for Ocean View. We're completing the design phase, and optimistically, we want to start our informal bidding process in October. We can award the contract in November, start construction, as barring any, holiday delays and maybe lead time on materials, but to complete it early in 2024. So that's all for Ocean View. If you have any questions, we can take some now before we move on to our next project.
Yeah, I think this would be we'll do each one do
Okay.
questions from council or commission and then public comment and then, or was it comments, question, what,
Okay.
the standard,
Right.
standard practice.
So questions from the commission first. Any questions?
Yeah, I had some questions. I was on the pickleball subcommittee with Todd, who's not here tonight, but so I did see that public comment about why aren't we restriping the tennis court? And I would like to see if the city can do whatever it can to make sure that gets striped. As they clearly say in their letter, they already had a certain number of, tennis, pickleball courts available to them. I think the permanent is really important because then you can get just kids or spontaneous play, whereas before we had nets that were locked away and you had to be basically in a group that had the key. But what they proposed was something that was a hybrid where there's these permanent ones that people can spontaneously drop in and play anytime, which is in the plan, which is great. And then the other one, if it's striped, then these nets can be pulled out and you can have more of a tournament play or larger groups, which there are often larger groups, it's my understanding. So, and you've tried to explain, what some of the reasons are. One question I have is the lighting. I know there was some discussion a few years ago of removing those posts and putting in more permanent, lights that are outside the play area. Would that bias some of the needed? So I have two questions. One is, would that bias more space that could make it feasible? And another is, other pickleball courts in the area in Berkeley and other municipalities nearby, I'm not very familiar with their layout, but do they have the same two tennis courts side by side that were converted to 100% pickleball and they don't have these ADA issues?
That's a good question. So as far as the relocating the light posts, that's something that we could consider, but as far as the budgeting for this project, that wouldn't fit in the budget. I think that would kind of blow our costs a little bit out of the water, a little bit with that. But as far as other pickleball courts, I'm not familiar, but our issue locally, again, that's actually excellent feedback, and the email from the community and local players, it's great for us to hear, so we know what's going on. But it does create an issue. We're going to have to discuss that with our ADA specialist, basically regarding wheelchair play.
Yeah, can I jump in on the ADA issue? So one of the constraints we have here, you can see the boxes at the base of the light poles. Those are the boxes showing the bringing the power to the poles. I'm particularly concerned about putting a baseline too close to that because that is a tripping hazard and you can roll an ankle on that. That's we're going to reset the boxes as part of the project, but over time that will become a tripping hazard. So we want to make sure we have sufficient clearances. The other thing for the ADA, the American Pickleball Association has a recommendation for clearances for a wheelchair accessible court. So we are reaching out to our accessibility folks to see if that's required. If that's required, that as Andre showed, the clearances are pretty significant and would essentially take up half of, we're looking at probably inscribing it in the middle of the tennis court, and that would really leave a small amount of room for additional courts.
Okay, so part of my question still stands is, do all other pickleball courts have this huge expansive area for ADA access? And so maybe the public can comment on that when they come up and comment when it's their turn.
Yeah.
And then, because if they don't, then I think, we should take that seriously. And then, yeah.
I appreciate, so I did look at a number of courts, and I haven't seen a court that met those requirements. Given our history with ADA issues, I am hypersensitive to that, so I'm going to, in the pickleball guidelines, they do say check with local local regulations and requirements for ADA. So I want to make sure that if we don't have it, we're on firm footing.
Okay.
Because we have had issues where we haven't been in compliance with ADA.
And then also you mentioned the electrical box being a potential tripping hazard, but if the lights move outside the fence, then the electrical box moves with it, or everything, all the electrical stuff moves outside the fence. And so all of those issues go away and it opens up some more space. But it does add some cost to the project.
It would probably more than double the cost.
Okay,
That's a significant
yeah.
expansion of the scope.
I know the community has offered for fundraising and things like that in the past, and so that would be something to listen to as well.
Can I make one more point on the, so our marching orders on all of these were based on the adopted master plan recommendations. So if we were going to change that, my sense the process would be for this commission to have a recommendation. Like I think in our view, we would nail down more of the ADA issues and really understand what our constraints are in terms of space to put additional courts. Come back to the commission with a couple of options. Commission can make a recommendation that would go to council that would be officially adopted.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and just so we're clear that everything we're talking about is in the Parks Master Plan. Nothing we proposed is outside what's in the Parks Master
So
Plan.
the Parks Master Plan, and this is the initial slide, it did include a specific recommendation for
One or two.
design and construct pickleball courts to replace one tennis court at Ocean View Park. So that was in the final,
That's the replacement, right?
yes,
Yeah. And then painting the other one, it doesn't say either way anything.
fair
about
enough.
Yeah.
That's, but I think what we would do is bring back options and then make a recommendation that we would take to council to get formalized.
Okay. Other questions?
Thank you. Any other question?
Yeah, so I played pickleball in Palm Springs and also in the Berkeley courts. And I noticed in Palm Springs, they had a little short net in between the two. I'd love to hear what the pickleball players think of this, but in between the two pickleball courts so that the balls don't get into the other court. I'm just wondering if that's something that the pickleball vendor or the equipment vendor might have to consider. I mean, I'd love to hear from the community, see if they even want that. But I found it to be, you're just not getting in the way of other people, which can avoid tripping hazards and all these other things. So I'm just curious if you saw that in any of the.
That's actually a good point. That's included in our design as well, and based on a suggestion from a pickleball player.
Oh, great.
So we're going to have the 4-foot fence that separates play from the 4 pickleball courts. But are you asking about another fence in between
Yeah.
horizontally?
Yes, exactly.
That's something we can consider.
So this follows the U.S. pickleball guidelines. They talked about fences separating the batteries east, north to south, and then the longitudinal fencing separating sets of courts. So
Oh, so it would have that. So it would basically be like a tic-tac, like a cross.
So there would not be fencing between the two pickleball courts going, if you can see my cursor, let's see.
North to south.
North to
Okay.
south. There's no fencing here. And in some ways, with our reduced clearances, putting a fencing there would.
No, okay, that's fine. I just want to suggest, though, the fencing that I'm recommending wouldn't be like perimeter to perimeter. It's like a very low, I almost want to show you a picture from Palm Springs, but it's basically very low, and it's just like,
Posts.
it's like a netting, exactly. So anyway, it's just something to consider, because I noticed that when I played in Palm Springs, it was just so much easier. I mean, I didn't have to just go into somebody else's court. Anyway.
So we're also adding a couple of things here. We're adding a second gate. You can see it in the middle at this location here. So the idea would be that players can enter and exit the courts with as little, with minimal disturbance to the other people playing. And then we have benches on the outside as well as inside for queuing, people waiting to play. One thing that we are not showing here, but we plan on doing, there's a sort of a
Drinking fountain.
dilapidated drinking fountain that we're looking at replacing with a water bottle filling station. So this is really going to function like a new court.
Great, thank you. Any more comments from the board?
Yes, more questions came up. Did the city, when I was on the pickleball subcommittee, we reached out to, or pickleball representatives reached out to us and communicated about what the needs and goals were. Have members of the pickleball community been working with the city on the particulars of this plan? It sounds like you've been working with the vendor and looking up the national guidelines and things like that, which is all great, but have people, locals, been involved?
We have had some email communication. I think it's fair to say that with the structure that we're here, we're probably pretty close to alignment. I think the big issue is the number of courts and how that would get.
Sure,
So-
like that low fence, maybe people want it, maybe they don't, that Commissioner Chang Frank mentioned, so that would be something.
That's the first I've heard of something like that. Again,
I don't have a sense of it, but
And the-
other people would, so, yeah, so getting the locals involved.
yeah, we are getting the locals involved. My sense is since we're pinching the clearances between the courts, anything there would create a barrier that I think would not be.
Okay.
And
And then one quick question was, the fence line separating the pickleball courts from the tennis court, I see it looks like a little bulb out where the two of them there. What's the purpose of that?
let's see, in the middle there, this area.
To the left and right of that, there.
So these are breaks. So the pickleball guidelines has specific lengths for what that longitudinal fencing should be, but we wanted to have, so this meets that minimum requirement. We also wanted to put breaks in the fence because when night play, the controller for the light is on the post at this location, so people would have to walk over there to activate the lights.
So is that fence that comes down and back?
No,
or
that's a dimension line.
Oh, so it's just
It's a break.
It's just an open. A break is an opening.
It's a 12-foot break in the fencing.
Break in the fence. Oh, I get it.
I thought it was a bench or
break.
something, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's probably,
Yeah, if you couldn't see
That's
that.
the lingo. Okay.
Understood, okay. Another question.
I have a question about the orientation. So how do I get from the parking lot? How do I get into, do I have to cross the tennis court to get the pickleball courts or vice?
no. So we have a gate here, would have access to the tennis court, and this is an existing gate. We have a gate at this location for, which is the existing gate, which was provided access to that tennis court. And we're providing a second gate here. So essentially this gate would provide access to these two courts. This gate here would provide access to these two courts.
Okay, so you don't have to go through a tennis game to get to pickleball or vice versa? Okay.
Separate entrance, yep.
The only time that I think that would be an issue is if it was night play and I think the lights go off and you have to reset it or something. So at that point, I think everyone would want the lights on.
Okay, can we move on to comments from the public? Anyone in the public like to make a comment? Could you stand at the dais up there, the podium?
Hi, my name's Kathy Taruskin. I'm the person who wrote the public comments in the email, so I can answer some of your questions. In terms of the master plan, I did a little homework this afternoon, and pickleball is mentioned 31 times, and it has 3 different descriptions of what it's really going to do at Ocean Park. One of them says convert Ocean View tennis courts to pickleball. Another says convert one court. Another says convert 1 or 2 tennis courts to pickleball. And then the third one, which is within Prop 68 recommendation, is the one that finally says convert 1 tennis court to pickleball with the implication that the second tennis court has no changes. So it's been confusing all along. We were crossing our fingers hoping that the 2 tennis court conversion would happen. And so this is why we're suggesting the hybrid version of maintaining the second tennis court, but making pickleball available on it. In terms of how ADA works around here, I was involved with Cedar Rose tennis court construction. There's a big problem with trying to accommodate some of these things when you're working with a fixed tennis court. You know, it is only 120 by 120, and so it's hard to accommodate some of the most specific recommendations. When we worked with Berkeley, the Parks and Rec director was much more concerned or careful about how wide the gate entrances are, or if we did seating outside, how accessible that would be to wheelchairs. But once they get into the court, I think as long as it has, you know, at least three foot clearance or so, that a wheelchair could actually work its way into there. Bill over here works with the wheelchair group. He has a weekly session over at James Kenney Park in Berkeley. That is simply one tennis court, and I don't know if they did any special consideration for wheelchairs, but they're doing fine there. In terms of other courts being converted, there's no other location close by that has done two side-by-side pickleball courts or tennis courts converting to 8 pickleball courts. One of the reasons is several, like Booker T. Anderson and Castro and El Cerrito, they cheated on the original layout, so they're not 120 feet wide, and so you can't do this configuration, which is why both of those locations only have 6 pickleball courts overlaying 2 tennis courts. So that's that. Your question about the short fencing, we actually had friends of ours come and talk, or some of the better players come over and talk about, you know, how close is too close for fencing. And if you don't have 7 feet clearance on the sidelines, you know, you're gonna have you have a higher risk of injuries for the players who really do a lot of running and stuff. So I think the better players would say, don't have fences that are, you know, too close, 5 feet apart and stuff. So I just want to reiterate that, you know, the demand has gotten so much larger since we started this path down asking for courts. And so we just have to have more courts. And this is the only location in all of Albany that will work, because all the other tennis court sites are too close to neighbors. We don't want to bother residences and stuff. So this is the ideal location to ultimately have 8 permanent courts. Maybe we work our way towards it, but if we could have 4 permanent and 4 temporary, that's what we're asking. Maybe does anyone have any questions for me? Okay.
Thank you. It helped clarify some things.
I first want to commend you on these plans. It is such a wonderful step for the pickleball community. I found pickleball about 1.5 years ago and have found an entire community through it of all sorts of ages. It's amazing, like the sorts of folks I have unexpectedly become friends with. And if you open my phone, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of people with the last name Pickle as their last name. And those are all folks I've befriended through pickleball. So I want to commend the work you're doing to put this through. Also want to lay out the fact we currently do have the ability for 4 courts at Ocean View. While they are not to this standard, this is impeccable and brings us more to the standard of Montclair Court in Oakland. I would encourage the committee to consider the scope of where this project could take on, and definitely listen to folks like Kathy, who have done really amazing organizing in the community and gathered lots of opinions from folks. Even just painting 4 additional courts would be a huge asset. We already have the nets, so the only additional cost would be the additional line painting, which it sounds like there's going to be some line painting already happening during this process. So I imagine the increased cost could be not extraordinary. And also, should additional costs be found in this project, to reach out to the pickleball community. In many cities, we've done fundraisers to help Kathy's been leading fundraisers in El Cerrito, and the community is definitely willing to step up to make things as wonderful as possible so that this resource can be shared with the community and continue to find folks to bring into the midst. I'm someone who has long time attended at Bushrod Park in Oakland, which is probably a really helpful place to cite as a place where it's really working well, mainly because we have the ability to go up to 6 courts currently, and even then we still have wait times, which is just speaks on the volume of demand. They also have some very good lighting until 10:30 p.m., which is quite helpful. The only courts in East Bay that I can think of right now that have lights until at least 10 p.m. would be Montclair Park and Bushrod Park in Oakland. There's currently no other outdoor play that's available to the community, which becomes a really big problem when we don't have such beautiful long days like we're having right now. So the bringing up of the lights is helpful. Even if they're not moved, it would be helpful to be considered if there's any improvements that could be made to them, because currently they are quite a bit more dim than at Bushrod Park, which has at least decently playable lighting until 10:30 p.m. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please step up to the podium.
Hello, I'm Deborah Bernhardt. I'm an Albany resident, and and first of all, big thanks for seeing this go on and maybe go through. And I only really have one concern, is that we have 4, you probably have already heard this before, but we have 4 pickleball courts now play on, and we will be getting some amazing new ones, but it still stays at 4. And through the 6 years that I've been involved in this project, talking about it, we always talked about it at least 6 courts, if not 8. And I guess it's a provocative question, but I just would like to know, why wouldn't they line courts so we can have more courts available for leagues, tournaments, round robins? Also, an example, I play at Castro Park in El Cerrito on the weekends, and we have 24 players, all like from 9 to 1 p.m., 24 players on 6 courts, and an estimate of about 20 to 40 people waiting to play. So if you would consider the crowds that will be here on these 4 courts, it's going to be intense. And I vote for 6 to 8. I mean, at least striping them for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments from the public? Anyone online?
We have, two online.
We have another person in person.
Hello, I'm John Swindell. I'm an Albany resident for 25 years. I've been playing pickleball for 10, and I've been trying to get this through with everybody else for a half a dozen. I always tell everybody I was not on Medicare before this started. Anyway, one of my concerns is these clearances, and I know the ADA is an issue, but I'm curious where people are going to be, how many people are going to be playing in wheelchairs. I know that there are wheelchair players, and we don't see more of them, but I think the main issue is there's no steps, the gates are wide enough to get into play, and I just wanted to point out some of these clearance issues that I see up here now. And one of them is this, the top pickleball courts. Looks like you got 7 feet clearance there, is that right?
It's off of the fence, yes.
From the fence, from the court to the fence, 7 feet. That's not bad. The next one is 8, is that right?
Yes.
I'm trying to read it. And then this one here, by this fence, this one is 5, right? That's pretty tight. tight. And if you've got 8 feet here, I mean, I don't want to mess with playing too much, but I think this play with a solid object next to it is really too close for younger people than me who can bang into it. Also, I'm looking at this bench right here. We've got a really tight clearance between that existing post and this seating. I don't think that's going to work personally. And I don't know what this spacing is here either on this corner. You know, people serve wide across here, and you have to back up. You're going to bang right into the bench, you know. So anyway, try to not have people too close to the solid objects. Maybe squeeze a little space off the tennis court. I don't know. But anyway, anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Public comment off.
Yeah, we have 2 people online. I don't know how to do this. Let's see. Amy, you can go ahead.
You're on mute.
Okay, there you go, Amy.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just want to say thank you also for moving this forward. It's great. I play pickleball in Albany a couple times a week, also in Alameda and Montclair. And both Alameda and Montclair are converted tennis courts, a single court to 4 courts. And just for my experience is that I agree with the previous commenter about those benches that are inside the court area. I know in Alameda specifically, they originally had that and had to move them. People, like he said, serve. It's difficult to return serves in that corner. There's tripping hazards. Sometimes lots of people try to squeeze in and wait, and it's crowded. It'd be better, I think, if all the benches were outside. Pickleball people generally have their gear clipped to the fence, and that tends to work well, and I think that'd be my comment about the benches. Otherwise, I think it looks great, except that I wonder if there was any consideration given to using the opposite tennis court. I prefer to play on the side that you guys have done. It's shadier, it's nicer, but it is kind of a hassle to have people coming the whole length of the pickleball court, or even when people are playing tennis, to be walking through that whole length. And if it was on the other tennis court, you could have that corner entrance for 2 courts and maybe put an entrance over in the, see where you guys have that at the bottom? That's a wall to hit balls on, and it's really, really long, and there could be like more seating and an entrance for the other 2 courts there. Walking across the back side of the courts is easier, shorter, and might provide better access and maybe also 2 more distinct seating areas for people who are waiting to come onto courts. But I don't think we should have benches encouraging people to either try to wait on the court, or also I would be kind of concerned about myself around those corners when I'm playing, like running back for lobs or, like you said, serving. So I think that's mostly my comments, but thank you very much, and it's going to be exciting to have it done.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Next, we have Philip. Okay, Philip, go ahead.
Good evening. Sorry I couldn't be there in person with circumstances. I do appreciate finally seeing this layout. And just for a footnote, I worked with Darlene on laying out the pickleball courts on Booker T. Anderson, so I'm pretty familiar with Clarence's. I'm just disappointed we haven't seen this before to comment, because it doesn't work. Early on, we made a suggestion, which don't know why it didn't go anywhere. We suggested making all this pickleball courts and moving the tennis court over to Peggy Thompson. And everything got dropped on that, and everybody wanted to force this tennis court at this location, and a tennis court and these pickleball courts cannot coexist as they're laid out. Right now, 5 feet, it doesn't work. It flat out does not work. You're going to have players running into that fence and hurting themselves. The 10 feet between the court, or the 8 feet between the courts, really should be 10 feet. Because even at 4 feet each side is a minimum that doesn't work. So this layout needs to be looked at very carefully. A lot of times that gap in the fence, that 12-foot gap in the fence, there's going to be balls going through that gap and onto the tennis court. So that, and the benches, as people have stated, really don't work there, because you're playing along that baseline and you're going to run back and you're going to hit that bench and you're going to run into people standing by the bench or bags. So I'm not sure where this is coming from. I know I've asked many times through the city to be involved with whoever's laying these out and planning it, but I've never gotten a call back or a return message or anything, or any acknowledgement that I've made an attempt to help lay out these courts. I think we should go back to the original idea we had for this, and I don't know where it changed Prop 68, where the public didn't have that input, but we know at that point that you could not get a tennis court and 4 pickleball courts to work on this limited amount of space. So I appreciate the work that's been done. I think it's a good starting point. I think it proves that it doesn't work here. The other thing that's important about 6 pickleball courts minimum is that means we can have sanctioned tournaments. 4 pickleball courts does not allow us to have tournaments. We have informal tournaments, yes, but not a formal tournament. We need 6 courts minimum. We don't have the clearances, we don't have the courts. We're shoehorning in something that really doesn't work for the community, the pickleball community, or Albany in general, because pickleball is growing and growing and growing, and we need the courts. And this is, from day one, I said this location was absolutely perfect for pickleball because of the noise that we're running into in Southern California, even Cedar Rose, where the neighbors are complaining about the noise. There's no neighbors here to complain about the noise. So I hope we can relook at this. I hope that this commission can then make the recommendation to study this location of this tennis court and possibly moving it to a different location, or eliminate it altogether, because we have enough tennis courts in Albany. We
Okay.
don't have
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you. Any more comments?
None online.
Okay, we'll bring the conversation back to the commission. Would anyone like to start commenting, please?
Yeah, I have a few follow-up questions just from the comments. I have a question about the lines, just basic lines. Is there a reason we can't just paint lines? I mean, especially in the sort of spirit of flex courts, it's just to, even if, I'm not sure, I kind of followed the whole clearance question. I'm still not understanding why we couldn't just paint the lines.
So I think we can, there's a, yes, we could paint the lines. The clearance issue is real. One of the things we chose to put the courts, pickleball courts, on the east side because of the boxes on the boxes for power to the light posts. If we would have aligned we wouldn't want those boxes to be within that 5-foot area of the court, because that would be a horrible tripping hazard, and we wouldn't want that. So that it actually has more space by putting them on the other side. We can, and I think that's the question we have of do we want to paint additional lines? And I think our work is to confirm the ADA piece of this, and then maybe play with the dimensions to come back with a couple of options that have additional courts, and showing the clearances between key things based on some of the information that we've heard tonight.
Okay, so that's a possibility, that
Yep.
sounds like. Okay, another question is about the sort of eventual conversion, if that happens, to all pickleball courts. Is there a way now to construct like holes or whatever it is that the contractors need to do? Just anything cost-saving now, even if it were, a hole, then it's plugged over.
Probably not. That would be a tripping hazard that would grow over time, and if that conversion happens, we would want to put in put in, established, permanent new foundations and whatnot. So I would
Okay.
say not.
Okay, I'm
Good
curious
question.
if
It
that's,
wouldn't be tamper-proof.
has to be
It
tamper-proof,
wouldn't be
okay.
something that's permanent.
Okay,
You need the foundation there, and then to drill the holes down, to cover that, it wouldn't last. It's not something permanent.
okay. Well, maybe when we're thinking about the fencing, we can really think about what we don't box ourselves into, in terms like what's the most flexible way to design even the fencing, so that if there's an eventual conversion, then we can do that. And the commenter's point about the shade, so it sounds like there's no possibility to put the pickleball courts in the court, the potentially preferred area. If it's more shady, I'm sure that's more enjoyable, right, for players. So curious if that's possible at all.
Again, I think we lose more space in
Okay.
they point out, the comments are pointing out that this is a bit of a jigsaw puzzle and trying to we're pinching, established, pickleball association clearances and tennis clearances to fit these courts in. Flipping them around will only exacerbate that because the placement of the boxes, which we don't have on the other side.
Okay.
Boxes are on west of the,
Okay, got it.
west of the
And-
fence.
And then, sorry, the last one, the fence in between. Is it possible to take a little more space from the tennis courts for that fence in between? Is that?
Adjusting the fence.
Yeah.
Again, yes, but then we're pinching tennis court, like
Well, if the tennis, I'm just thinking if there's the seating area, like the tennis, they would potentially have seating area on the other side. So would they even need that space?
so we could eliminate the seating.
Okay,
Like Mark was saying, right now, for the pickleball courts, that's the minimum clearance that's allowable, 5 feet. It's 12 foot for the tennis courts.
oh, I see.
We move the fence, we're encroaching on that minimum.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, just sorry, the last question is, it seems like people raise legitimate concerns about not seeing this plan before tonight. And so for the next round, can we be sure to post it like before the 72 hours?
We will try our best. Some of this stuff is, we're tweaking this through the end.
Yeah.
This is a conceptual drawing, and so we are going to post it online, and we will accept comments and incorporate those as best we can, in the hopes of coming with a more formalized final layout.
Okay. Even after next meeting? Like, if you come with a new conceptual plan next meeting, will people have time? You know what I'm saying? Just,
Yes, we will try our best to
Okay.
get everything done ahead of time.
Okay.
There's,
Thank you.
a lot of
I understand. Thanks.
Yeah, so a few comments. One is, I think we've heard from the public, from the community, that some input is needed. And so I think with the subcommittee that I was on, the pickleball community designated some people to be a liaison and talk to us. So I would like to see the staff set that up with one or more people that the community feels is representing their goals and their needs. And so that we can be a much quicker iteration and have a much better product before us at the next meeting. Another thing is that I'm not an ADA attorney, but we have people telling us that there's other pickleball courts that don't have this huge amount of space that you're talking about. I've heard what you've said about you're worried about lawsuits or whatever. But what I would point out is that if the tennis court is kept a tennis court and just striped, then if for some reason and we've also heard from the public that there are wheelchair groups right now that meet on what I think what they're saying, or they're meeting on courts that are like the permanent ones that are already designed up there that don't have any extra access. But ours would, if we stripe the tennis court for temporary netting, then people would have the option of even just setting up one net there and then having this huge expanse of space around it. So that's another thing to think about. One of the benefits of a flexible space over there, if ADA concerns are the primary concern here. It's clear the lights and the electrical portion limit some of the design. You've made that clear. You've also made it clear that it will cost more money to move those poles and the electrical service. I think we need a quote to see what that would cost for the next meeting, and then look at what's in the budget and look at what the community already, I don't remember how much, it was thousands of dollars is what people were committing before to just help kickstart the project. And if there's this specific aspect of it that would then make the project even that much better, and maybe with the lights where they are, it's going to be okay. But if moving those outside opens up a lot more flexibility, the city decreases its liability significantly for injuries and all sorts of things, then and the community is willing to fundraise or whatever, the money's there, then I think we just need to see what some of those numbers are. So I'd like to see that come back to us. And you mentioned the 12-foot needed for the tennis court on the boundaries. What is there now in that conceptual design between the tennis court and the fence dividing the pickleball courts?
You're talking about the dimensions on either side of the sidelines?
I think so.
Yeah, that's 12 feet.
So right now that's 12 feet.
You have 12 feet. Yeah.
So you can't really move the tennis court east-west?
No space to.
Huh. Okay. But we've been hearing all kind of input about benches and locations and not even being there, and parks that put them there and then took them away later. And let's just cut through all that and get the public, the people who play there all the time involved, and do a quick iteration on that. I think that'll really help the project out.
So can I push a little bit on that 12-foot again? So why can't it be less?
Well, that's the standard for tennis courts.
Is it a guideline? I mean, when you stand, I mean, what makes it a standard?
It's based on the standard, and that's for safety reasons, and that's just based on whatever governing body put that in place. That's what we have to.
And if it's less, then you can't play tennis on it?
Sorry?
If it's less, you can't play tennis, or if you get sued, you could get sued because you had less than the standard?
Yeah, and that brings us closer. So depending on if you're saying to relocate the tennis court closer to the fence, as Mark was saying, it brings us closer to a tripping hazard for the conduit coming up, connecting the post. If we push it even towards the other fence, and again, we're losing that. We can verify that too. I know that that's the standard, but I can verify why that's, what's that based on?
So what we've tried to do is as best as we can, follow the established standards for both tennis courts as well as recreational tennis courts and pickleball courts, and follow their published standards.
Yeah, because it seems that, I mean, maybe in a tournament tennis court, that might be a standard, but this is less so.
This was more the recreational piece. And then for
Okay.
the lighting too, we're also looking at trying to get fixtures that are provided lighting that would meet a recreational standard. So,
And the other thought was that fence that divides the two, maybe it's not so rigid. So if you ran into it, it's not softer, rubber bending, something. Any other thoughts?
Just a question is, how does staff see a way to identify pickleball community liaisons to?
So I emailed with Kathy here, and we'll continue to do that. We'll probably reach out to tennis folks too to make sure we're getting their voices as well.
Okay, I think that sounds great. I think email can be good. I think also in person or other ways that can do kind of rapid back and forth can be helpful. That'd be my recommendation. Thanks.
Okay, so do we, what's our direction here?
We have two more parts, two more projects to discuss.
Okay,
This one would take up a lot of time, but
yeah, thank you. Thank
a little
you.
quicker through the next
You know,
two, yeah.
there's one other point maybe we didn't point out here. We have we've identified these two trees. They're acacia trees that are growing basically into the fence line. We're proposing to take these out because I think one of the problems we have with the existing courts, we've trimmed back these trees pretty significantly. We want to make sure that there are no trees in the area that are providing leaves onto the courts so we can keep them clean. I think that's one of the key things of the deterioration of the courts around the perimeter. So we're going to clean up the perimeter so that it drains better and has less leaf buildup on the court. So it'll have better playing surface for whoever is playing.
Great.
I would just say, you might want to talk to the tennis community about that too, because they may appreciate those trees for shade.
Did you say trim?
So we're going to remove these two acacia trees because they are growing into the fence, and that's going to be a long-term, that'll deteriorate the court long-term. These trees along the side have probably enough that we will trim them, keep them trimmed back so they don't weep over onto the court. And then this ivy growing on the fence is going to be removed because that's another area where a bunch of leaf debris gets on the court and deteriorates the surface.
Great.
And then one more comment about shade is, I don't play tennis or pickleball, but it seems like a number of the courts are pretty much out in the open, and these, I don't know how much shade they really get. So I would hate to see the city prioritize keeping, ensuring there's shade if people aren't used to shade and don't feel like they need shade, and that would impact the courts if we kept trees encroaching on the court.
Thank you for that. Good discussion.
Really appreciate the feedback as well. Yeah, that's very helpful. Design. So Memorial Park. It's our second project that we're going to focus on. This has two projects that are with different phases, the dog park as well as the lighting, the path lighting that's going to be installed. So we'll look at the project scope. So we're going to complete that sidewalk and a curb along Carmel Avenue. It's going to connect to the AC path. Installing new double and single gates at the new entrance. It's going to be on the southwest side of the park, and which we'll see on the next slide. We have the new concrete pad as well, a bottle filler with a dog bowl. We're going to run a water line to supply that. New trash and recycle receptacles along with the dedicated dog waste bin as well. Installing protective sports netting along the fence separating the ball field, new plant material, new trees and benches, the trees providing a shade for the seating area, and a new drainage system to eliminate the drainage issues there on the south area of the dog park. And of course, in another phase, in another project, we're gonna install the LED path lighting. So we'll see on the conceptual plan the layout. With the concrete pad there, adding an additional space off of the existing structure. We'll have the drinking fountain along with the dog bowl there as well. And then you see the trees with some space off of the fence there with the benches for seating. If you notice there, the northeast entrance, that's gonna be permanently closed. And we'll have the new entrance in the south with the holding area for when you're bringing your pets in to the dog park. Also that storage area, that's something we're gonna, again, this is a concept, and we'll work with Albany High regarding the configuration of that storage area there. I think we have some photos of the existing, where the new entrance is gonna go along with the extended concrete pad, a drinking fountain with the dog bowl. The next slide we have showing where the sports, protective sports netting's gonna go, for any foul balls that are coming over from the field, the ball field there, along with benches that are gonna be installed there with the bench pads and trees along the fence. Our next plan, that's more so for the GC, that's the irrigation plan, some changes that we're gonna make, that we're proposing to make, so that there's a separate zone, so it could be, the timing's different for when things are happening in the dog park, when that's open and when it's watered over in the ball field. Our next plan, we actually show the completed lighting, site lighting plan, and basically along the path for LED lights, I believe there's gonna be five or six posts there. So that's complete and ready to go, and that's gonna be a separate phase for Memorial Park. So we have our tentative schedule based on the approval of the plans, hopefully to get an informal bid process going by November, award the contract, start construction in January and finish in spring of 2024. So any questions on this less controversial project?
Swing back to the irrigation plan. So you're disconnecting from the ball field irrigation.
Yeah, so I can give you some context here. So this was designed as an auxiliary field, not a dog park. So the irrigation system for this area is connected to the ball field, and particularly this. Let me see if I can get to it. This branch right here. This was connected to the infield, and they water the infield significantly because they want to keep that nice and green. And so this area was always sloppy. And so we're disconnecting that so that we can control this area separately from the baseball field. And so I think that's going to help us manage manage our water, as well as we're looking at either a French drain or a drain, just a catch basin along this side, because this is another area that gets pretty swampy. So I think hopefully the combination of these will make a better, keep it more of a stable surface.
Great.
I wanted to say I'm really glad to see this come to fruition. Julia and Todd and I were on a subcommittee for this as well, and to see it finally happening. I also really appreciate that the city and staff are looking to make additional improvements beyond what we originally thought with this sort of, nuts and bolts, the infrastructure here that seems like it's going to help in a lot of ways that people maybe not even realize is, needs anyway. So the fact you're looking at drainage, I know we've had some complaints about the water pooling up in this wet winter that we had, and it looks like you guys have really been thinking about that and how to address it, and I think that's great. I'm really looking forward to this. And these other ideas of the netting to stop the foul balls, I don't remember that even being mentioned. I think that's great. I did have one question was, I think you mentioned there's a storage area or something. I think there's something drawn up sort of in the ball field area. And so that's a storage for who, and how is that part of this project?
So I can address that. So one of the things we've done is really develop a closer relationship with the baseball team and how the field's used. And through this, I don't know if you remember, there was, we're trying to get to it. In this area right here, the Albany High's baseball team, as well as I think Little League, as well as a travel ball team, use the field pretty extensively. It's also rented, and this was an area where they stored materials. And one of the areas of feedback has been that they're pinched for space, and so we talked with them a bit about expanding the storage area, and then actually, and this is one thing we're going to interface with them to make sure we understand, have a separate space for the baseball team, have a separate space for rentals. So if there's equipment specific for rentals, that would be in another cell, and then, you know, maybe some general maintenance equipment would be in another one. So it's a way to better organize the equipment around the users.
So a couple questions with that. Is this like a fenced-in area that's open, or is this a structure?
Fenced in that's open. One of the things we want to talk to them about would be the what sort of surface we would do. I don't think we want to spend a whole lot, but maybe put down some drain rock or something so it wouldn't be just, so it'd be more of a stable surface. It wouldn't be super wet.
So another question, and then I don't want to forget, I do want to mention about potentially wood chipping the whole dog park, but I'm going to try to remember that. But the, who owns what land? I know we call it Memorial Park, but then there's this ball field here that seems to be pretty much exclusively used by the schools. So, and I know we've looked into that, and I've been on a subcommittee for multi-use of that area, and we've, you know, been talking to schools, and Julia in particular, Commissioner Chang Frank. So that if it is school property, then I'm not quite sure the city could or should actually be. I mean, I think the storage sounds fantastic, and somebody should do it, but if it is school property, then that's a whole issue that needs to be explained and figured out.
It's city property.
It's city property.
Yes, and that's very clear.
Okay.
And there is a MOU or agreement between the city and the school district for its use. One of the things we've done is engage more on sort of how it's used. It's used by baseball, but it's also used by the Little League. It's also rented, so there are multiple users there. It's also used by when the younger grades were co-located at the high school. This was used as a kind of recess area as well.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Other questions?
I have some questions.
Question? Yeah.
I just have some clarifying questions. So is there the Boy Scout bench that's there, is it still going to exist? That's not moving, is you just don't see it?
No, so the Boy Scout bench is right here. What we're doing is adding 4 feet on the front of it, because that'll give us an accessible pathway from the entrance to the bench.
Okay, and then that's a double door. I just can't tell. That's a double gate, right? So there'll be like a smaller gate.
Yes, so there's actually multiple things going on here. Sorry, Andre, I jumping in all over the place. This has been, you know, on the back of my head for years, so I've thought through this, and I bring my dog here pretty often as well. This is the maintenance gate, which is 2 large swinging gates. This would be a standard gate out here that would be full height, and then it would go into this sort of this holding area, which would have a lower gate that would open up into the park.
Okay, because that was definitely a request. And then would the other gate, the one that is currently used, would that close?
I think we're looking at permanently closing it.
Okay, good. That was, because that was the plan. That was sort of this idea that this might help alleviate the noise concerns of those neighbors. Okay, so that is the plan to kind of.
What we don't want to have the panic bars there, so people will exit that part. We want to force all the traffic through this other.
Okay. Great. And then was there talk of a small dog area? Is that not there, or?
There was, I've heard mention of it, but it was not in any of the recommendations that we found. That's something that probably could be added, but
Yeah, that was something that's still in our work plan to investigate throughout the city. It would be a small dog area, but I don't recall ever seeing, this project's been going on for years now. I don't recall ever seeing an actual carve out or a specific, like where it would actually be, so
Okay, and I mean, that's something that could be added later, right? That's not a big one. Okay, because I remember we never did talk about it. I don't remember, we didn't have a public process about it, but then somehow it got on some plan somewhere. That's what I'm confused about.
It's come up in a number of conversations, but nothing formalized.
Okay.
I do know that, just bringing my dog there, I imagine other people do too, it gets pretty small when you get a lot of dogs there, so chopping it up even more would may
Yeah.
diminish one side, user experience for another side. So just a thought.
Okay, thanks.
Another question was about wood chips. So I know the city has a big requirement from the state now to utilize a whole bunch of mulch and roughage, and I don't know what you call it, from all sorts of organic refuse waste. And I know that one of the things from being on the dog park subcommittee and going out to the park and going door to door in that whole neighborhood and interviewing people near the park, that I found was a number of people, and on the surveys, wanted to see that go year round. And my understanding is that with all the fields get closed in Albany in the winter because of the rains or seasonal rains, and an opportunity to repair, and also it's just muddy. It's a muddy pit. So, but there are some dog parks that are all wood chipped, and they're open year round. So is that, of course, that's not like I don't think of it as a capital improvement kind of thing. There's regular maintenance but that's something that would need to come before this commission, I would think. Yeah. And do you see that as a possibility?
That's one thing I've, again, thought about pretty extensively. Two thoughts. One, I think the type of wood chips are important because I've seen, and actually just talking to other dog users there at the park, so that there's a kind of split. Some people like the grass, some people like the wood chips, and then some people want wood chips but are concerned about splinters. So my sense is we would do something like the FIBAR that we use in playground areas, that it's been treated so that all the roughish edges are taken off. But then there's also a grade issue. If we bring in 3-4 inches of wood chips over this, it starts piling up, and so we might have to pull out some soil. So it's not as simple as just coming in and dumping a whole bunch of wood chips and it's fine. So I think that's something we can continue to investigate in maybe a future phase or
Okay.
not.
And one other quick question is, the timeline said it anticipated, the best guesstimate is in March. So what kind of, it's usually closed, like I said, in the winter anyway, due to the rainy season, but it's usually open before March. So do you think it would be closed through March, like an extra month or two for this?
I'm not sure. I think
It'd be closed for the duration of this project, basically?
no, I don't think so. I think my guess is and Andre, you might want to speak. Maybe I'll make commitments for you. No, but I imagine we would put up some sort of fencing that would section off maybe the area where we do concrete and and so it would be a smaller dog park, but would still be functional.
Okay.
You have 4 trees in there. I know this is very conceptual, but in my experience, trees do very poorly in dog parks unless they're somehow protected or elevated.
Yeah, we've talked about putting some sort of fencing around that.
Yeah, it's a great idea to have them in there. Yeah, I like it a lot.
And that we did plant, and you can see them on the what is that, east side. The trees that we recently planted, and those on the outside, hopefully those will grow up and provide shading like the ones further south. Since we have the ball field on the other side and that's the bullpens, there's really not space to put the trees on the west side.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I thought that's
so
interesting.
we're kind of, again, pinched for space.
And I guess another question was brought up with the mulch idea, which is interesting. How would you get a large truck in there? Where's the larger gate? Or do you need to?
It's in the same location. We're keeping this maintenance gate that you can barely see right here.
But does that go all the way into the dog park or just into the entry of the dog park?
You'll be able to drive through here, but there's also, if we need it, there's a gate between.
Oh, got it. All right. I saw this a different surface. I thought that was a fence line.
Yeah,
Okay.
this area. So there's a gate here.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there's a gate here. So I think we have a couple of options to get maintenance equipment in there.
Okay. Maybe we should ask we're doing a lot of commenting. Does the public have any comments? No? All right, good.
None online either.
just have a small comment that we're a little casual about trees here. Removing them or protecting them. So I just want to make a comment that we should be careful about depriving any area in our town of shade by cutting down trees.
I believe those are proposed there, but,
Well, we're talking about in the first.
oh, the first one,
of the
correct.
first place.
The acacias.
Acacia trees to be cut down. So I just want the commission to be aware of that. The trees are valuable, and we shouldn't be casual about saying we're going to chop those down because they have leaves on the courts or something like that. That's all.
Thank you. Well, any more comments? That's it. I guess we're set. Do you have any more you're done?
So the third part,
No, you're not
last but
done.
not least. So we have Pierce Street Park. And we have an excerpt showing the master plan there adopted in 2022. So the project scope for this project, we're going to add, there's issues obviously with getting access to the playground. So there's kind of man-made footpaths now. So we're going to have a dedicated entry stairway with a handrail. We'll look at options for that. There's going to be new landscape boulders and plant material to dissuade folks from cutting through and just to beautify the area as well. A new asphalt path with a bollard to avoid any vehicles driving down, and a new shade structure for the seating area within the playground, the fenced playground area. So I'm looking at I think we have some photos first, yeah. So that's basically the pathway there from folks taking a shortcut down into the playground. The next slide shows an even steeper pathway. That's behind the bathroom. In looking at our conceptual layout, we do show stairs being constructed there. That's one option, but there is the option near the bathroom, but actually we would make maybe a main entrance down at that other stairway there that connects to the asphalt path. And then we would actually install a new AC for another path coming down connecting to the existing path as well with the bollard there at the top. We'll relocate some of the existing landscape boulders and then install new landscape boulders and other plant material. And then we have a shading or a shade structure there in the corner of the playground for that seating area. So the next one just shows a section of well, these are proposed to be concrete steps, but we'll show an option for a timber steps as well as a stair option, which honestly fits the aesthetics of the playground a little more. This is taken from the top of Albany Hill on Jackson Street. Something similar to that could be constructed at Pierce Street. Then we have a tentative schedule there again, hopefully by December, get an informal bid process, award the contract. Construction can start early next year and then be completed in the spring of 2024. Any questions for this project?
So you mentioned the shade structure. What would that be? What would be the shade structure? Right there, yes.
So we're looking at some options, but you could have posts, basically metal posts similar to the playground structures, and have either, I forget the material, I think it's vinyl, but it doesn't have to necessarily be a hard material like a plastic material, but you can do vinyl with the right tension off of those posts for shading. That's an option that we're looking at.
Did you guys consider some kind of trees or anything in that area?
This area is particularly difficult to grow things. This is a former highway off-ramp, so the soil here is not good. John has tried very hard to get trees to grow here. We don't have we have limited irrigation, so we do have trees in the area, but it's not a great tree environment.
Got it.
I was going to ask the same question with the trees. I mean, I know there's a lot of like the compost that we're supposed to be applying. So first of all, I don't know if that's being done there, but is that a way to sort of enrich? I don't know.
I think that can help. There's also just, it's not very good soil, a lot of rock, a lot of construction debris. So that's what we're struggling with.
Yes, I had a few questions. One was, well, first of all, I appreciate the stairs going down, because that's been something I've certainly noticed and been a pet peeve of mine as someone who lives on the other side of the hill and walks around and finds that the only way to get into the park is to go walk all the way to the north end and then take this long looping ADA path. So that's why everybody's cutting down the hill, and I really appreciate that the city has looked at, which is something I recommended several years ago, and the city's doing, where are people actually making their way down the hill and turning that into a permanent thing. I think that's fantastic. My question is for the playground. When we went through the decision process on how to spend Prop 68 funds, one thing is that people may or may not be aware of is this is the only playground in the entire city park that was in, I think, a low-income area that qualified for 100% of the Prop 68 funds to be applied to it, and all the other parks, the city has to do some sort of match because they're not in a disadvantaged area. So I think we do need to do this park right for equity reasons, and that the proposal that we had put forward that I think is in the Parks Master Plan, but I could be wrong, for the shade was after we had seen and discussed that the trees just don't grow well there, and of course trees would have been great, and the trees were planted but died, and there could was to have the thing covering the shade covering the whole thing, and so that the kids themselves are shaded, and parents wherever they're standing, caregivers wherever they're standing or sitting would have some shade, so I would like to see something that incorporates that as part of it, see what the cost differential is there.
Sure. One of the things we'll look at that and look at costs. One of the things that we were thinking about, the staircase on the south, that one's a particularly tricky one. There's a PG&E line going down there. The grading is much more significant. One of our thoughts was to eliminate that and do maybe a posted cable fence or something to dissuade people from going down that area, and really formalize the other two as our entrance. And part of that too, it's just not a clean entrance into the park at the base. It's not as clean as the other ones, and I think that one's going to be the most expensive from a construction perspective.
Okay, it's good to know those things. But I would say that anyone coming from the south is going to. Plus, the only real feature there is the playground. Mm-hmm. Most people don't go there for the path, so if there's and I hear those challenges, yeah. But I would encourage staff to try to make that one work.
Okay.
So when you said vinyl, you meant like a fabric sale, a sale fabric?
Exactly. No.
Okay. And that'd be on the post. I got it. Yeah, I agree. Any improvements here would be great. This park is so much potential and lacking, especially when the housing project opens up and it's going to get a lot more use, and I mean, every time we think of a use we need, we always look at this park. Well, we could put it there, maybe we could put it there.
Yeah.
And so the idea of piling it with mulch, I mean, we all want reclaimed derelict land. Maybe there's a marriage there. So, just a thought.
It was one of my ideas where if we get pinched for meeting our quota for compost and whatnot, this place could use a lot of
Over
it.
time, right.
Cap it.
Yeah, right.
And then someone in the pickleball comments was saying, why not just move the tennis court here? Well, of course, that's brand new construction, and that's a whole nother order of magnitude in cost, I would think.
I think, it's also maybe important, you can see this, the grading that the housing project's going to do will extend into this area, I think somewhere around here. So this grade will change some, so I think there probably is an opportunity, and I think it's even included in the master plan, Parks Master Plan, to do, site park-specific planning for new improvements. And I think, there's a plan for and you can see the bottom of future bike path through that area that connects down on Cleveland to further down on Pierce. And, I think this park is ripe for some additional planning and other amenities.
Public comment?
Yeah.
Oh, question?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would this be a situation where the park would be closed during construction, or?
My guess, no. I think maybe when the shade structure is being constructed, playground would be unavailable, but we wouldn't close the park totally. It's not that big of a footprint. Again, sorry, Andre.
Yeah, any public comment on this?
None are online, no hands raised.
All right, we're going to get that. Once the affordable housing project opens up, we'll get a lot more comment on, I'm sure. Great, thank you. I guess that closes that agenda item.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andre.
Moving on to discussions on possible action items. These are the street tree removal applications, 6.1. John?
Hold on. Come on. There we go.
All right. I'm John Hawkridge, urban forester for the city. We have two locations with tree removal applications. Can we see the next? 955 Stanage and 1501 Washington. Two street non-emergency street tree removal applications applied for by the property owners. Can we go to the next? Just to preface what we do with removals, I know we get a lot of feeling angst about removing trees in the city, but I pulled together some of the stats for the last 5 years, and basically in the last 5 years we've removed 52 trees, and on the other hand we've planted 570 new trees throughout the city. And currently, our new street inventory shows us that we have 4,782 street trees in the city. Next. Okay, street tree removal. Trees are considered for removal when they pose a risk to the public, when they're diseased or damaged beyond reclamation, when they're causing extensive infrastructure damage that can't be repaired without removing the tree, when they cause repeated infrastructure damage that has been repeatedly previously repaired, or they're in conflict with an approved city project. Next slide. So we'll start with 955 Stanage. The application, actually, I said in error that they were both property owner. This one was applied for by the city. This is part of the sidewalk rehabilitation program. And we have one liquid amber American sweet gum tree that is in conflict with the sidewalk and the repair of the sidewalk. Can we go to the next? That's the application. Next slide. This is the tree. For both of these locations, we've contracted with Hort Science, and we have Daria, who will speak on her analysis of the trees at these locations. And I believe Mark will speak to the sidewalk project since James is out ill tonight.
So do you want to?
We can go to Daria now?
Yeah, why don't we? Let me bring up.
Take the.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for having me and members of the public.
Almost here.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay.
As John mentioned, we were contracted, Hort Science Bartlett Consulting was contracted by the City of Albany to consider, next slide, please. Sorry.
Let's go to the.
There's some animations.
You want to,
Yeah, so we assessed health, structural condition, and risk of 5 trees, and we were asked to make management recommendations as appropriate. Next slide. So we assessed using the best management practices for risk assessment, and if you can put up there you go. So we look at the likelihood of a tree falling and causing injury or damage using the methods described in the tree risk assessment best management practices. We performed a level 2 basic inspection. Next.
Got
it. Which includes a visual assessment from the ground. You can keep going. Yeah, there we go. And next slide. So we assessed 5 sweet gums, liquid amber, sweet Styracea flua. They ranged in size from 13 to 19 inches. 1 tree was in good condition, 3 were in fair condition, and 1 tree was in poor condition. For the most part, these trees had typical form and structure for the species, which is a decurrent structure with upright stems and lateral branching. 3 trees tonight are being recommended for preservation, and 2 are being recommended for removal. And I'll go into a little more detail on the removal recommendations. Next slide. All right. So for 955 Stanage, unfortunately, the limited available space here has been filled completely by the tree. And even with some of the there's no way to mitigate this, right? The situation is only getting worse. The tree has a 19-inch diameter, which means that it's getting bigger, and any bigger that it gets, the structure is going to be compromised by the sidewalk and curb around it. It's a case of the right tree in the wrong place. Next slide, please.
Would it make sense for me to jump in and give some context on the, I have a couple slides for the sidewalk, just so you get a sense of what we're dealing with and what we looked at in terms of things we typically do for, no.
I just know about the trees, not the sidewalks.
Yeah, let me, There we go. So this location was flagged as a critical repair in our 2021 sidewalk survey. It was also noted in 2020 in a separate survey and likely existed many years before that. The issues here are the tree has uplifted the sidewalk, so we have issues with meeting ADA slope coming into the area where the tree root is. We have vertical uplift, and you'll see in the next slide, we have linear discontinuity. And this makes this area what critical repair is. There's no best path to travel. So someone with mobility issues would really have a difficult time navigating this area. And as Daria said, this is we don't have much flexibility here because of the space and other constraints. The sidewalk here is about 4.5 feet wide. You can see along here, you can see the vertical discontinuity, and then along here you see the linear discontinuity. And you can tell that this sidewalk here is significantly higher than the surrounding sidewalk further down the block. And this gives you a sense of how much it's moved. The tape measure on the right is measuring from the curb line. So the curb line and the sidewalk, when originally constructed, were about the same elevation. And so the area from the curb to the front face of the sidewalk has lifted 1 inch. And then from the sidewalk, then from the concrete area in the planter strip to this front face of the sidewalk, it's lifted another about 5 inches. So this has really been about greater than 5 inches of lift in this area. And because of the, let me get back, because of this tight area, we're not able to do the measures that we typically do to preserve trees and whatnot. This route is so significant that the typical, let me get back here, the typical things that we do would be root pruning. This would be such a, and Daria could talk about this, the amount of pruning would be so significant it would damage the tree. There's not enough space for us to do our typical curve that we do because we're constrained by right-of-way. We only have about a foot or two of right-of-way on the outboard side, and that doesn't change the picture in terms of how much root that we would have to remove. There's a couple of tricks we do play in terms of ramping up on either side, but we have constraints in terms of driveways, pathways, and things that set grades that we don't have the run level to use an ADA acceptable slope. We also looked at doing somewhat of a ramp similar to like a curb ramp. Again, when we do that, we could probably make the grades, but we don't have the space to do the required level landing on the top because you transition up a ramp, you need a level landing, and then you transition back down. And we don't have that space. So we're not left with a lot of tools to manage this without significantly damaging the tree. And then another point of context is that this area has been repaired 15 years ago, and so I imagine this area has been this way at least 3, 4, 5 years. So this will be a recurring problem if we don't correct it now. I think most of our sidewalk work, we try to eliminate the conflict between the tree and the sidewalk so that the tree can go on living and not impact the sidewalk. And we've done about 300 locations, and so we've only taken out a handful of trees in that area, and it's really in these areas where there's really no other option to to address the issue.
I'll mention that just cutting into the buttress root of a tree, which is the portion of the tree that comes out, kind of like is compromising the structure of the tree and the stability. That would not work for the tree. All right, let's move on to the next slide.
Do we want to, similar to the parks, do we want to?
Yeah, probably comment on this one, then move to the next one.
Separate votes.
Yeah, so, comments, questions, questions. I have a couple questions, kind of obvious, but I gotta ask the question. So if you did maximize the right-of-way, I think it is 2 feet past the edge of sidewalk, that would push the sidewalk over 2 feet. That's still not enough room to provide growing space for the tree, if you basically took 2 feet of that sidewalk away.
Yeah, but 2 feet. If there were 2 additional feet, we wouldn't be cutting into buttress roots. It would be a different.
Well,
I don't think we would have the full 2 feet to use because we need at least a foot from the right-of-way to construct the sidewalk. So we wouldn't want to encroach onto the private property. We wouldn't build right up to the edge of the right-of-way. We could probably only use it a foot or so.
I mean, you couldn't, you might have to remove their shrubs, which is a problem. And then even that gateway might have to be moved.
There's a
Yeah.
fence there too.
But you couldn't build the sidewalk right up to the property line?
Well, we would have to get an access agreement to get on the property.
How much, you just gotta put a board there to hold the concrete, right? Okay, yeah, but that would, now we have that super thin area, it had 2 more feet.
Yeah, if you had 2 more feet, I think this picture would be different. Yeah. I just don't.
Okay, well.
I was told that 2 more feet was not going to happen.
Okay, I'm throwing that out there as a thought. Other questions?
Yeah, is there, it sounds like, was there an attempt to talk to the property owners?
I believe so. James has been in contact, and I think they would be opposed to losing their fence and the fence and.
It's one of those things where, I'm sorry to jump in, but, we're running into all the time where people build on the city property, and where's the watershed moment where we say, sorry, but the better good of the city is to push that back.
Can I comment on this? I think it's on, or it's on. If we were to push the sidewalk back and leave this tree is still growing, and it's an aggressive growing species, and from what we can tell, there's a pretty large size root that's already pushing out in that direction, and that sidewalk wouldn't have a long lifespan, and we'd be constantly repairing the sidewalk.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and
I think the next time we repair, we'd be pushing more forcefully to remove the tree, and I feel like there's still going to be a lot of root pruning to be done on this tree, even if we push the sidewalk back 2 feet.
I think it's pretty standard to expect that this tree would reach a maximum diameter of about 40 to 50 inches.
You may have said this earlier, but how long did it take to go up 5 inches?
We don't know exactly.
Roughly?
We don't know exactly. It was repaired about 15 years ago. We have documented this level of offset in 2020. My sense is it was showing signs of it before that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So we saw, John showed a slide of the few trees that have been cut down and the many trees that have been planted, and you've alluded to that sometimes we go around a tree we're able to move the sidewalk around, but this doesn't seem practical here, and there's other issues with it. Can you estimate how many trees we do typically save in a year with all the sidewalk work the city is doing, where we encounter sidewalk problems? Our tax dollars are helping to pay for all these improved sidewalks. About how many do we actually go around or prune tree roots and actually do save the tree by doing measures like that?
Pretty much I would say the vast majority of our sidewalk repairs are tree-related, and we implement the curved the curved, we do a number of things when we expand the tree wells to give the tree, we both take out concrete, and actually in this case, there's 2 trees just north of this that we're going to expand. We're going to take out more concrete around those trees to give them more space. So we wherever we can. So I would say upwards of 80% of the sidewalk repairs have involved trees that have had some level of root pruning, or we did root pruning, crown thinning, and then the bending the sidewalk, which was it 1 or 2 years ago was adopted as a city standard. So we do that pretty much everywhere where there is a tree. So that's kind of our standard practice at this point.
Okay, so it sounds like it's pretty routine to do all sorts of things to try to save the trees and preserve the trees, and it's the rare example that it just can't be done that comes before us.
Yes.
And that's one of these.
Correct.
Okay.
I think we have approximately 300 sidewalk repairs we've done since the program started. I counted 10 removals because we're going to repair the sidewalk out of those 300. I also counted 11 that were removed after sidewalk repair because of damage that was done to the roots. Although we tried to save the tree, it didn't survive the root pruning. So.
It'd be nice to have that summary too on one of your beginning slides before these to go with
We
it.
plan to, I have these stats, I have every tree that has come before the commission on a spreadsheet, and we need to clean it up a little bit and get it so it's easy to view online. We want to put this online solely.
A summary would be nice.
Can I give a plug? This is what one of the prime things that Natasha is going to be doing in developing this program, so people get some real the real statistics around tree removals and what's driving it. We see that there's a couple of sidewalk-related ones, property owner-generated ones, and then sort of other issues, whether they're dead and dying trees, or like PG&E had their issues last year that triggered some tree removals. So
Okay.
we want to get that information out there so people have it.
All right, thanks.
Other comments? I guess I'm back to if those shrubs weren't there, let's say it was just gravel, an empty lot, gravel, we would just push the sidewalk back and keep the tree, right? Or was there other structural issues that would still be a problem?
The tree itself, the condition's not great. I think Daria did some analysis of the crown to trunk ratio. The trees, it looks like it's been limbed up a lot, which leaves the crown exposed higher up where there's more winds. A liquid amber, in the books, you should have at least a 10-foot wide planting strip, or it might even be 10 feet on either side, 10 feet from a sidewalk. I can't remember, but we'll say 10 feet. This is 27-inch planting strip. It's just not appropriate. It's not an appropriate tree for this street at all, for this location.
I'll just say that if this tree were to grow to mature size, the curb would start to be.
The curb would crumble too, yeah.
So it's impinged on both sides. So, if you were to have as much space as were possible in the public right-of-way to work with, you could probably get another 10 to 15 years out of this location. But at some point in the future, the structural roots will be compromised by the curb, and we'll start to see pillowing, or when the tree grows over the edge of the curb face, that impedes the structure and stability of the tree.
Okay. So, I definitely see it doesn't look super strong in the huge top heavy in the long. I mean, it looks like it could blow over. But I also see habitat there. I see 2 nests.
Yeah, I think if we had all the space in the world, we could definitely get some more time.
Right.
We could buy ourselves some more time. So I think that's, it is what it is in terms of the space that we have. But if there were more space, we could definitely work around, there would be other solutions that would be possible.
Go to public comment.
Yeah, good question. Public comment on this tree.
I have a question. Is the tree otherwise perfectly healthy?
It's in fair condition.
What does that, I mean, is it, it's a healthy tree?
Yes.
It's a healthy tree. That's what I would like to know. And so it seems to me that whenever there's a conflict between a sidewalk and the tree loses. And we've lost over 25 large shade trees, liquid ambers particularly. So whenever I see this analysis, it's always risk. It's never, let's balance the value of the tree, the environmental value of the tree with the risk of the sidewalk, people tripping, etc. And I'm just really, really upset and concerned about that. And here again, I feel like there's no appreciation for the value of the tree, for carbon sequestration, for oxygen, for just the beauty that a large shade tree has. And maybe we're growing 400 trees, planting them, but they're tiny. And if you drive around Albany, half of them are dead because we don't water them. That's it. Thank you.
We do have 2 hands raised. Tina, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Tina Kim. I'm the property owner at 955. I appreciate the tree for its maturity, shade, and aesthetic contributions. I personally, though, have tripped on the sidewalk due to the roots buckling it and have sprained my ankle, so I know that the hazard, I know personally what the hazard the tree roots buckling the sidewalks can pose. I'm concerned even more so when I hear the potential for increased limb drops if we are to touch the roots of the tree, especially like cutting into the base to fix the sidewalk. There are several children in the area, including my own 2, who walk by that tree every day. And I'd hate, like, if we have a winter like we did last year, for limbs to be dropping on anybody, especially children who are going to school. So I'd ask that people's safety be considered as a top priority. I'm not supportive of taking 2 feet from our property line to allow for additional curb. We have several mature trees on our property alone, redwoods and other trees that provide shade and tree cover. So I think that our property contributes to that already. And so we are supportive, my husband and I, of removing this tree and planting another more appropriate tree in its place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. We have one more. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hi, yeah. Aaron Frank, a resident. I almost don't know what to say. I've been to so many of these meetings and have seen the same thing with all of these trees. We as the public we really don't have any voice. I already know what's going to happen with this tree. We also have no way of coming to a meeting like this with any real knowledge about what's going on. The tree's going to come down. There's never been a case where the commission has successfully saved a tree. There have been a couple votes against, but those trees have come down. I've requested from the city lots of information about which trees are going to be a problem, what the plan was for the sidewalk. I've tried to understand that. I've gotten no response, and I haven't gotten I haven't gotten responses even according to law. So, I mean, I'm in here, I'm just listening to this. I can't remember the consultant's name, Daria. She said if we had two more feet, it'd be a different story. We could save this tree. And then there are 2 more feet. That's what we're, and all of a sudden the story starts to change. Oh, well, the tree, you know, it's not going to be saved because it doesn't seem that, no. It's just not the way it's going to go, but it doesn't, certainly we heard a very clear statement that this was a healthy tree. It just needed more space, and we could give it more space. And I would like to see the council one time take a risk to try to save one of these trees. And if in 15 years it needs to be removed, well, I'm a taxpayer. I've paid for lots of these sidewalk repairs. I'll pay for that one. But I'd like to actually try to save some trees along the way.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Any
Aaron.
more comments?
No, that's it.
Anyone comments from here? No, we just heard that. So bringing back to the commission, comments from the commission.
Yeah, I have a question about the information request, because I know that not just the most recent speaker, but others have mentioned in questions that they've requested information from the city and haven't heard anything. And I just don't think that's a very good public response. So I'm curious about that, if there could be, if that could be addressed.
We're working at trying to pull all the information and getting out. So it's coming.
Okay. I think it'd be helpful to let those people know so they don't feel like it's just falling on deaf ears.
Fair enough.
The other thing that I'm concerned about is hearing, and you know, there was many tree removals on Washington that I could not speak on because they were within 500 feet of my home. So I had to, abstain. I just not participate in that conversation. I'm very concerned about this message that the homeowners keep on talking about limb failure and this deep fear that seems to be the same sort of fear that they're hearing. And I know that there was one homeowner who said that it was the city that sort of instilled that fear. And I just really worry about that sort of potential misinformation because other cities, I've talked with other cities, I've done a lot of research on city tree policies, and other cities don't necessarily think liquid ambers are all dangerous. Actually, they have a policy of root pruning. Berkeley said they do not chop a liquid amber down if there's limb failure. Instead, they just systematically do more pruning. Sunnyvale also has this kind of policy. And so my concern is that we're doing this with a healthy tree and saying, oh, we're instilling fear in homeowners, and then we, say there's a sidewalk repair, so we should just chop down the tree anyway, when we have this street management plan coming up so soon, and we haven't really, as a community, really decided how to handle these trees. And so I would just say that that's my real concern, hearing and seeing all these, this sort of same thing coming up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would, for one of the public speakers, the first public speaker, I would, who stated that it feels like the trees are always losing out. We've heard from staff, and staff can mention some numbers as well, that many times when the tree is causing problems with the sidewalk, clearly is having some issues there, that the vast majority of the time the tree wins and the tree stays, and our tax dollars pay for moving a sidewalk around, pruning roots, doing all sorts of things. So we're not seeing those come before this commission. If we saw every single one of those come before this commission, I think it might be a different perspective. It can feel like the city is just mowing these things down, and we do, and certainly when there is a tree removal, we need to consider it seriously. But what we've heard the staff say is that the city does all kinds of things at our expense to preserve as many trees as possible, and the recommendation is that this one doesn't have the room. What I would say to the second speaker who said that, well, let's wait, maybe wait 15, give it 2 feet and wait 15 years. We heard from city staff that the sidewalk was repaired 15 years ago, and so here we are 15 years later, and the tree isn't working out in that location, is how I would respond to that. I would also point out that this commission, I was recused as well from tree removals a year or two ago when the bowling alley project came before this commission. I live close to that, and I live in a part of town where there aren't a whole lot of established trees. You wouldn't call it a beautiful tree-lined street on Adams Street and around there. A lot of rentals, a lot of people that don't own homes in that area. And I want to say dozens of trees were approved for removal in the one vote. So that was something that, although I was totally fine with that, because the developer said we're going to replant even more trees. The city here is telling us we're going to replant this tree. We're going to replant. We replant way more trees than we actually remove. So I don't have. I think sometimes there's a need for that kind of removal, and there's a bigger picture here, and that's what I wanted to say.
I think there's a bigger picture here in terms of the systematic removal of large trees. So I think there's one thing to save a tree or to save a space where there's a medium-sized tree or a small tree. And a lot of these repairs I've seen, there isn't, maybe there was one time a tree there, but there isn't necessarily always a tree next to a sidewalk repair. I think in the information gathering that Natalia, is that right? Natasha is going to, I think it would be very helpful to talk about the age of the tree, the maturity of the crown size, because from all these public comments, that's a real problem. That completely changes the aesthetic if you have a large canopy, 50, 75, 100-year-old tree versus a little, 5-year-old tree that's not even really, looks like it just sprouted. So I think what I'm hearing from what the community is saying is they don't want to get rid of these big trees. And so I think there's a way that, this sidewalk repair, we are taking on that cost of repairing. I'm wondering how many we can actually afford to repair it again. So I would say my concern is to say like, oh, well, we have to chop the tree down because it will eventually rise up the sidewalk again. Well, now we actually have public funds where we could repair it again at a certain length of time, because maybe there is value just to have that tree and the canopy and the aesthetics and the carbon sequestration, et cetera. So I just want to put that point out too.
Yeah, I had some comments here. So I can appreciate the homeowner's comment about having the large redwood there. It is a significant tree and it can help, but there's no guarantee. That's on the homeowner's side. It's their tree, that'll remain. But it does add a lot of tree canopy to the city. So they are doing that part. The homeowner did mention that we're taking 2 feet from their property. In essence, I believe the right-of-way is 10 feet from the curb line in. So in fact, we wouldn't be taking any private property. That's not the intent. The intent is to maximize the city property. If we took the tree out here and just patched the sidewalk, we'd be left with a very small hole, which you wouldn't be able to plant much more than a small crepe myrtle in there. And so it's just a reduction, again, of the tree canopy. Now, I do think that tree probably is limited lifespan. Obviously, it's going to blow the curb out. It's not going to live long. But I'm thinking that it should stay in. Well, here's where I'm actually not clear on my thoughts, because I would like it to have a stay in place until the tree management plan comes on board. But obviously, that has to be addressed soon because people are tripping over it. So maybe my ideal world would be we keep it till the tree management plan, but I don't want people tripping over that. So that has to be fixed sooner. Now, if we pushed into push the sidewalk in towards the inland and maximize the city property, when the tree does come out, because it still might need to be removed, we now have a large hole that could accommodate a larger tree. But then again, it's right underneath a electric line, so it's not a good place for a large tree. So I'm jumping back and forth in my thoughts. I'm sorry if I'm not totally clear here. But I think Albany is just riddled with trying to get big trees wherever we can, and we keep trying to put them in places where they don't fit. So I think if we're looking to make a vote on this, I'm going to probably have to go with taking the tree out. That's where my vote is falling on this one.
I have a question. Is there a way to, because I recognize the homeowner's concerns, is there a way to do any kind of mitigation on the sidewalk shaving or something in between the time?
Not in this case. The issue is not just the discontinuity, it's the slopes. And the shaving will deal with the discontinuity, but not the slope issues.
But I've seen sometimes the filling in with asphalt, or I know it's not pretty, but
It's actually the running slope coming into this exceeds ADA requirements.
it's more than how many inches? What's the?
It's
Degrees is what you need.
It's degrees of slope on the sidewalk, which is the real driving issue, and that's where it becomes a significant barrier for people with mobility issues.
Okay. I guess,
I would,
Comment on that?
yes, John.
There's not enough concrete left where it's lifted. If we ground it down, there's no concrete there. I have a slide somewhere where you can see from the side how the entire slab is lifted almost equal with the sled that's remaining there. So grinding isn't really a good option.
I think I have this.
Okay, so you needed direction on this, right? That's what we have to do.
Yes. This is, you see this shows the slope issues that we run into.
okay. Ready for a motion? Any other comment?
Yes, need a motion.
A motion to approve the tree removal?
Take roll.
Does anyone
Second.
second?
I'll second.
Okay. Commissioner Chang Frank?
No.
Commissioner Chin?
Yes.
Commissioner Martin?
Yes.
Commissioner OG?
Yes.
And Chair Kent?
I'll say no, just to balance it off. I'm on the fence. Like tomorrow I might change my mind. No.
So that's three yeses and 2 nos?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that means it carries, correct? Perfect, okay.
Let me get it up there. Oh, there it is. Let me get to the. There you go.
1501 Washington, this location is the St. Albans Church. The administration applied to remove all 4 trees in front of the church, all 4 liquid amber trees. They're concerned over the sidewalk damage. There's a little bit of ramping up and down, a little bit on each tree. The trees have affected the sidewalk. Next slide, please. That's the application. Next slide. So these are the trees. Again, I'm going to let Daria speak to the condition of each of these trees. Go forward.
I think we've got them in the same order, John and I. So that picture that you just, you can kind of try and keep that in your mind when you're thinking about the presentation that I'm going to jump into. So the first tree, is that north, John? No, I'm sorry, east.
Oh,
East.
hold on.
The first tree east, this one, Tree was in good condition with excellent structure. You can see it's a pretty well-formed tree. And only suggestion here would just be to knock out some of the bricks in the right-of-way and give the tree more space for moisture to accumulate in the soil. Go to the next slide. So the next tree down, we did find some loose bark, about a 3 foot by 6 inch wide, taper with a small wound, minor decay. We think is under there, and again, it's not a terrible situation at this point. It's something that we recommend keeping an eye on over time. Next slide. So this is the third tree down from the east, and as you can see, there was a failure at some point, and it took out quite a large chunk of the trunk, and that failure, although it has calloused over well, it has left a little pocket of decay, and as you can see, my hammer went in there quite a distance. And because it's such a large portion of the trunk, there's a real concern that that second portion of the trunk will fail at some point. So it's structurally compromised at this point. We did rate this as having high risk. So that means high risk means that there's a target as well as a potential for failure. And the tree was also just in poor condition. So next slide. So the last tree, I guess on the westernmost side, does have this kind of funky root situation, which usually when you see stuff like this, it was a previous failure. So the tree kind of fell over and then someone pulled it back up and it was allowed to grow straight up and down. So we don't really see trees like this fail ordinarily. It's a defect per se, but it's not something that concerns me a lot. The tree was in fair condition. It had a 15-inch diameter, and it does have this kind of area where it's minimally lifting the sidewalk, and it does have this area where it's kind of lifted out the curb. But I think we can easily repair that, hopefully, and not prune too much of the root system off where it would destabilize the tree. And I think we can have a pretty reasonable expectation that it will survive.
Yeah. I have a design that we've done. This is one area where we have a lot of space, and we have. Let me get through this. So we have done this type of design here at, oops. Gosh. Here we go. So we have a lot more room to do things here, and what we've done this at other places where we call it a holistic design, where we've coupled the sidewalk repair portion with an upgrade to the curb ramp. We're adding a bulb out. Because it sort of kind of serves two purposes. One, we need it for the curb ramp, and secondly, we need it for the, it provides benefit for the tree because that area where the tree roots have extended into the roadway will now just be part of the tree well. So again, that really helps with the tree. And we're also doing some drainage improvements that will really make this area much more, function much better for both pedestrians, motorists, just the general public, as well as the trees. So let me show you, and with doing the curb ramps, we have much more flexibility in slopes. We can change different things, and we have less constraints that we have to, connect back into. So that really helps in this position, in this case. This next slide here is where we've sort of mapped the routes, the major routes through as best we can. And let me kind of walk through this. We have this one major route. Heading off to the north, this piece. We think we can ramp up and over this route without without any root pruning or minimal root pruning. So I think we're pretty clean here. On the south side, we have this cluster of roots that, again, is underneath the AC. As we pull the AC up, that'll be part of the tree well, so that's a benefit. We're proposing a catch basin here to pick up water coming down the street. And so we have to snake this pipe through here. We believe we can get it underneath of the roots. One of the things that we're going to do is, and again, because we've coupled so many things together, once we open things up, we'll have flexibility to shift things around. For example, this manhole could be here, which gives us, potentially flexibility to miss a root if need be. The only route that is really at risk is this one right here at the bottom of the curb ramp. There's really not much we can do in that area, so we will be doing root pruning. And talking with John, we think it's far enough away from the trunk of the tree that it's not going to be great, but it's not going to be catastrophic. And this is, we have a contractor under contract, so all these removals were planned for the April meeting that was canceled, again in the July meeting that was canceled. So this is pretty close to being in construction. So we're eager to get going here.
So, I had a question. So the property owner requested all 4 to be removed, and it sounds like that was mostly due to sidewalk issues. And so in the staff report, I think it said that that none of these locations were identified, but in the latest round for the city's sidewalk repair, is that correct? Or one of them was identified?
So let me so what we're doing right now throughout the city is identifying the critical repairs. So these are the ones that meet a certain level of criteria that either have large offsets, slope issues, or a collection of things where there's what we call the no best path to travel. So someone with mobility issues would really have difficulty navigating this. And we're hoping to be done with the critical repairs, I would say this time next year throughout the city, and then we would then look at the next level. And that would, depending on what the selection criteria and how we would rate these other ones. So the trees further east, we believe those can be retained with street tree, our standard street tree management techniques. We would, root pruning, we could replace the sidewalks. There's potential for sidewalk shaving in that area that would help it. We do know that there's a ramp project that's contemplated by the church, and when that comes in, we would look at that, but that's sort of, we don't have those details at this point, so
it sounds like if we were to approve all 4 tree removals, as the property owner has requested, that they're not on the schedule for the city to repair any, like right now, and so it'd be on the property owner to make any repairs if there is going to be any repairs in the short term, and maybe the city would repair them later. But if neighbors are concerned about the sidewalk, which I don't know if they are, there's no guarantee the sidewalks are actually going to get repaired even if we remove these trees. Is that correct?
My sense is they're getting into a sort of
guarantees. There's no guarantees that the sidewalks can be
right, but there would be the way we've been managing sidewalks. We do sidewalk shaving throughout the city, so that's one level of mitigation. Then there's the repair side, and we always encourage adjacent property owners to repair their sidewalks. So that really helps, and a number of people do. But as you get into this, just for context, the 2021 survey, we identified over 15,000 sidewalk defects across the city. Some of them are very small, but they're defects nonetheless. And so it gets into a numbers game in terms of, I don't think it would never, but when would be a very open question.
And then one question is, what type of trees are these? I think somebody said, but I forget, and I assume they're not liquid amber, because we've heard from some members of the public that the city has it out for liquid ambers, and they're all going to come down.
These are liquid.
Oh, these are all liquid ambers? Oh, okay. And the city is recommending they all come down?
No,
No.
just one. Just the one
Okay.
that's decayed.
Just one. So the city has all sorts of ideas on how to preserve the other three.
Yes.
And at our taxpayer expense, potentially to repair the sidewalks and do all these things in the future, to preserve these trees, and has this picture here of how to do all these things to preserve that one tree that's got these funky roots out in the street that might solve some other problems by handling it all at once. And so it sounds like the city is thinking about doing a lot of things to preserve 3 of the trees, and that one of them just seems like it's too diseased to, is that correct? It's too diseased?
It's not disease, it was a previous.
Structurally
Yeah,
unsound, or?
structurally unsound.
Okay.
And which one was that again on the plan here?
Third one?
So the beautiful root picture that they've drawn here, it's the next one over.
That's good.
That guy.
Okay, and I would just note that these wells seem, like the previous one, the trunk fills up the entire thing, and it's about the same size as these trunks, and these wells are much bigger. Other questions?
Questions?
I actually went by there this morning and I tried to see the sidewalk, and the trees look beautiful. So I'm happy we're trying to keep at least 3 of them. But I do understand the complaint with the sidewalk, and I could see how it's not as bad as the previous place we looked at. But what is I know there's no guarantee. How is it looking to actually get the sidewalk fixed?
Oh, so this repair that we're showing here will fix the sidewalk in that location. We're not addressing the sidewalk defects further east at this point, but this will improve that, and I think it's a good, balance for mitigations to keep that tree on the furthest one on to the west.
Got it, thanks.
So Daria, once again, that third tree that had the bark injury, the loose bark, if it's not diseased, why is the bark separating again from the trunk?
Well, it lost a limb. And
That's a different, you're talking the second tree. Talking about loose bark.
Yeah, let
on
me
the
get-
second
Oh,
tree.
the loose, okay, I'm sorry. We think that there's some kind of, there's some discoloration underneath the bark, which leads us to think that there's decay in there. So it's not a situation that we would really be super concerned about today, but, in 20 years, we might come back and say, oh, yeah, there is.
The decay one, right, with the hammer in it? Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, so this, I'm getting confused now. So this one is the one that's being recommended to come out?
No, this one is being recommended for preservation.
All right.
So we're just.
So the one with the
saying,
hammer.
Keep an eye on it. This one right here, there is decay in this pocket, but really it's the amount of trunk loss that concerns us. So because of the limb that came out, there's quite a bit of decay in the trunk, which is getting worse. And
Okay.
because there's a rule in forestry about a tin can is strength loss if you lose more than half of the sort of can. If you think about a can as a cylinder, the strength comes from it being cylindrical, right? And if you lose a certain percentage of that strength, then you're liable to lose it entirely. And so that's kind of what we're looking at here, is that strength loss.
Got it. Thank you for that. Okay.
Yeah, I just have a question about any other mitigation measures to save the tree, the one that is structurally of concern, yeah.
Yeah, you could basically turn it into a wildlife snag. by reducing all of the limbs down to the trunk. So that would essentially remove all of the live green foliage off the tree. And there are quite a few cities, especially in the Pacific Northwest, along Puget Sound and along the waterways there, that have utilized that technique to retain large mature trees with structural damage and problems.
Essentially, you're just removing all the limbs.
Yes, you would be removing all of the living foliage from the tree.
What about any kind of I've seen actually very close to these anchors, what are they called?
Cabling or
Cabling, yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not really possible here because it's so low down on the trunk. So if it were further up in the tree, we could just remove that section of the tree and reduce the failure point. But it's pretty low down on the trunk. As you can see, it's kind of like below all of the branches. So in order to remove that section that's dangerous, we would have to remove most of the tree.
Maybe like a stump, a tall stump or something.
Yeah, a standing stump. Yeah, and I think, hearing a lot of your comments tonight is really helpful for us because I used to work in a city in Southern California, and we did a lot of crazy pruning that made trees look really awful in order to preserve them. And we would get a lot of times, 10, maybe 15, sometimes 20 years more life out of them by using very reductive pruning techniques. That's not possible for this tree, but I think it is something to think about and consider for other trees in the future.
So that wildlife snake is kind of interesting. What kind of wildlife would you use it? I mean, owl, or just
Nesting
woodpecker?
birds is the key for wildlife snags. So I mentioned in Seattle, Portland area, a lot of the sort of cities that are on waterways and coastlands, they'll use the wildlife snags, and you'll see, I've seen eagles in wildlife snags that have been preserved in parks, mostly in Seattle. But that's the idea, is that there would be available space. Wildlife snags provide a huge amount of habitat for nesting birds in particular, because they are looking for this kind of place to build nests.
But it sounds like that kind of thing on a city street would look like there's just a dead tree there, basically, right?
It does. I think it also provides an opportunity for interpretive signage and/or sometimes we have QR codes that you can tag a tree with and have a website that directs people's understanding and attention. And it doesn't look great, I'll say, at first, but I think once you get used to the idea of having trees in different stages of life, it can actually can really add to the urban landscape.
It wouldn't provide canopy, and it wouldn't do any more carbon sequestration,
Yeah, that's correct.
but it could potentially provide wildlife habitat.
That's correct. I do want to mention that, in the wood of the tree is where the carbon is stored. So it is storing carbon. It's just not producing anymore.
It's not taking in any more to grow.
Exactly.
Wouldn't it just start sprouting again?
It would, and there are techniques that you need to use in order to reduce foliage.
Okay.
So it really is focused on removing growing foliage in order to preserve the...
Okay.
So should we treat these all together? I'd probably vote on them separately, but maybe
We still need public comments, too.
we'll take public comments for sure.
Yeah,
on-
sorry, I skipped over that.
Yeah, we need
Public
definitely.
comment.
Oh, sorry, I have a.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Question.
So for this tree, you said there's there's a risk of failure. Is that like an imminent risk, or is there like a really short time frame, or is there really not any way to tell?
So we estimated the risk on a 3-year time frame. So yes, we rated it as high risk within that 3-year time frame. So So it's not imminent. Imminent means that it's in the process of failing. But within 3 years, I would consider this to something to happen within the next 3 years.
And then it is 4 minutes before 10. We should probably have a vote to extend the meeting. I would move to extend the meeting till 10:15 at the latest.
Second.
All in favor? All right.
Do I still need to do a roll call?
Yeah, you gotta do a roll call.
Commissioner Chang Frank?
Yes.
Commissioner Chin?
Yes.
Commissioner Martin?
Yes.
Commissioner OG?
Yes.
And Chair Kent?
Yes.
We'll extend the meeting.
Okay, public.
All right, so we really just have one vote. We're not approving the sidewalk repair. That's sort of that's done. So just voting on this tree removal. And so any public comment on this?
It's really for all 4 trees,
Ah,
because we've been requested to remove all 4 trees.
Yeah, I think.
It's not on the agenda tonight.
I think there could be to maybe, I've always looked at this as confirming staff recommendations. So staff recommendation is we had 4 trees ask for removal. We said 3 don't, so you could.
Well, we might vote to remove all 4. I don't know.
Correct.
I mean,
Correct, that's what I'm saying, so we might want to do them one at a time.
yeah.
Okay. All right, go ahead, please speak.
Good evening. I'm Reverend John Owens. I am the clergy person at St. Albans Episcopal Church. I just want to clarify our standpoint. We love our tree canopy. Our only real recommendation is to go with the city staff's recommendation. So if they're deeming that 3 can be preserved, let's preserve 3. But if they're, I can tell you, we have no interest in keeping the poor tree around if it's in poor condition. And I wouldn't call it fear mongering to our commissioner from what one of our commissioners here said earlier, because several months ago, the same type of tree existed across the street and it smashed a car. Literally smashed it with that. I mean, that car is no longer rendered usable, and we witnessed that, and there had to be an emergency tree removal for that. We've also witnessed people who have tripped on the sidewalk, and again, it's a liability. It's only a matter of time before somebody either sues the city or the church, for I don't know who, but we have seen people trip. There are a lot of elderly who come to our church. We have preschool. We are a concert venue for the arts. So there's a lot of high traffic that comes in and out of the church. And we just want it to be safe. But in the end, we do want to be environmentally friendly. We want to preserve what we can preserve. But again, if it's going to become a safety factor, we want to remove it. I really think I love the creative idea of being able to extend out the area to preserve the trees. You know, it's going to take a little bit of our parking away, but that's okay. Well, we would love that, you know, because again, we want to be environmentally friendly. And so I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Christine. I'm a member of St. Albans. I'm also a tenant at St. Albans, so I spend a lot of time at the church. So I have some things that I've observed when I'm there. The sidewalk is so buckled that a young person comes every afternoon to use it for their skateboarding ramp. When the neighbors come walking by, they often detour into the street rather than navigate the section of the pavement. It's actually challenging to even park close to Curtis Street at that point. And the damage extends all the way up onto the property of the church. It's starting to crack on the church's property. And I love trees, and I want as many mature street trees as possible, but I go with city staff recommendations on the health of these trees. Some trees just aren't good choices for street trees. Liquid amber seems to be one of them. And the car and the limb interaction that Reverend John was describing was because the tree across the street, the sidewalk was fixed, a curve was cut out, the root was pruned, and within a few months, a large limb fell on the neighbor's car. So it is indeed real. And I do think also when we're thinking about carbon sequestration and environmental impacts, we also would do well to consider what the environmental impact is for all of the fossil fuels that are burned to repair the sidewalk over and over and over, the trucks, the equipment, the fresh concrete that has to be created, the fresh asphalt that has to be created, and all of those things. So let's plant a really appropriate tree, and I appreciate the staff's recommendations. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Larry Lee. I live in Albany. I live around the corner from St. Albans. I've walked there many times. Sidewalk seems fine to me. I've never tripped. I think my neighbor Isabella, who is confined to a wheelchair, sadly, has submitted a video of her navigating the sidewalk in her wheelchair. She said it's not a problem at all. I appeared before the city council a year or two ago on a similar tree removal, and I'm happy to say that this commission seems a little more nuanced and sensitive to these issues. Daria, the last time I hated you because you just wanted those trees cut, and now I feel like it's more nuanced, and I'm really happy to see that. But I feel like we're always being reactive to these propositions to cut these trees down, and I think we all agree. I mean, if we can imagine Albany with all the trees cut down, it would be horrible. And if we can imagine Albany with way more trees, we would think that would be great, right? And I understand there are sidewalk issues, and I'm happy to hear that you're dealing with those sidewalk issues as best you can in a nuanced and creative way, and that's great. But trees are messy. Once in a while they fall down, they drop a limb, or they drop leaves on the tennis court, and I understand that. And there are risks, but I think we have to also look at the other side of it, the things that trees give us, the aesthetic value, the carbon sequestration, the cooling. I was in Larkspur last week, and it was 95 degrees, but then I walked down this path with all these big redwoods, and it dropped like 15 degrees in the shade. So we can imagine that it's just going to get hotter and hotter. So I think we want more and more trees rather than fewer and fewer trees. There's also the biodiversity with more birds and insects and that kind of thing. So I think we really have to look to alternatives to just cutting down these trees when the sidewalk is pushed up. And I don't know why we don't have a citizens tree committee to speak for the trees. I understand we have people speaking to safety, but why isn't there a committee speaking to the beauty and value of trees? So I had other things to say, but then I realized that this is the Park and Rec Commission, not the City Council, so I'll leave that. But thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? Shamir? Oh, sure, right here, sorry.
Hi, I'm Bob Seifer. I live in Albany as well. I'll start with the tree survey. The tree survey was up for just a very short time. There's a little over 20,000 people who live in Albany. If you want results from a tree survey, you should get 6,000 responses. That would be valid, a response from a tree survey. But it was up and down so fast, almost everyone I talked to missed it. So if you could put it back up, that would be great. That would be just a request, and you're at your liberty to do that or not. I'm wondering, where's our consistent tree pruning program? Where's our corrective pruning program? Why don't we use some of the sidewalk alternative therapies that are being used in Utah, Nevada, Wyoming, Massachusetts, such as slab jacking, deflectors, inhibitors, root barriers, terror walk panels, rubber pavers, interlocking paver panels. These are all alternative ways of getting sidewalks to be safe for people and keeping big trees. We can't save every tree. I really appreciate that you're saving 3 of the 4 of these trees. We can't save them all, but many of the trees that have come down, we've hired independent arborists to look at them. We come to the appeal process. We're not allowed to bring those arborists. We hired 4 arborists to look at the last 2 trees on Washington Ave, and they weren't allowed to come to the appeal process. We each got 3 minutes to speak only, and the trees came down. If we're going to plant 500 and some odd new trees, I appreciate that, but if you drive around, and especially if you drive down Marin, and if you drive down that street for a long ways, most of them are dead. There's a lot of dead trees, and small trees need 5 gallons of water a week. Who's watering the trees? You've watered trees with your truck. I know you have. I've watered trees on Santa Fe Avenue. I shouldn't have to water newly planted trees. Somebody should be watering them. And so they're not growing. They're not growing. So if you look at the last 8 years, they're the hottest 8 years on record globally. And the next 8 years are supposed to be hotter. We need large shade canopy trees. We don't need 3-foot trees, 4-foot trees, 5-foot trees, trees that'll be 25 feet in 25 years. We need to think about the big trees we have that are healthy. If they're unhealthy, they have to come down. But if they're healthy, we have to find a way to save them. We just have to. We can look at the liquid ambers as nuisances, or we can look at them as a shared opportunity to test some remedial methods for making our community better. Thanks.
Thank you. Bringing it back to the commission, I think we checked those.
There's no hands raised.
So who would like to speak first on this issue? Would you like to start? Any comments? Oh, first of all, let's clarify what we're actually discussing. I'm a little confused myself. I thought what was before us was a decision on this one tree, but I got a little bit confused when you mentioned that.
It seems to me there's an application for the removal of 4 trees, and that's what we have before us, and that we should have a vote on each one. The staff have recommended to save 3 and eliminate 1.
Okay.
But we have.
Well, we could do that. Give them all number 1, 2, 3, 4, starting at the Curtis Street going east.
Let me put up, I think John had a good slide that showed the trees in numbers, so that would be something we can use as a guide.
Yeah, use the numbers there. Beautiful.
Okay.
And can you just point out which tree is the one that's
Number 3.
recommended? Number 3?
Number 3.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
see,
so,
let me see if I can cursor on it.
let's put a motion forward about tree number 1. I put a motion that we save tree number 1.
Do we want to do discussion though first, or no?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Well, we can make the motion to
Okay,
discuss, but
okay. Go ahead.
yeah, I'll make a motion, we retain tree number 1.
A second.
All right, discussion. Anyone have an opposition?
Seems great.
Okay.
I mean, usually we recommend to remove a tree second, and then, so what I think we should have someone, does anyone want to recommend removal of tree number 1? And if there's no second, then it just dies.
Okay, that'll work too. I think-
Yeah.
That's true. The motion dies.
All right. Okay, does anyone want to recommend the removal of tree number 1?
No?
No.
Someone's going to make a motion, or we just can't get past it.
Okay.
I recommend removing tree number 1.
Okay, is there a second?
Not second, motion dies, good. So,
Okay.
all right.
For 2.
But you don't have to, just want to be clear, you don't have to recommend that if you don't really want to
I just want to
recommend.
make sure that I don't want to, but.
Yeah, but by saying it, I do think that kind of.
I know, it sounds
seem like-
terrible.
Yes, I wouldn't do that. I would.
That's what I was trying to get away
have
with.
a motion to not recommend. Anyway.
Robert's Rules of Order here.
Right, so anyone want to recommend the removal of tree number 2?
No?
Nope.
No, but I do want to discuss tree number 2, because I think if, that's the one that has the rot in it. So if we don't remove it, do we want to bring it down to a snag level?
No.
Well, the recommendation
No.
was to keep an eye on it.
Not at this time. Okay. All right, great. Moving on, does anyone want to recommend removing tree number 3?
I move to remove tree number 3. Do we have a second?
That's the one I thought, that's right, we could
It's the
also bring that one to a
Staff
snag.
is recommending removed.
So I would I would recommend the snag idea. So not remove the tree, but bring it to a snag. And I think that's kind of a really cool thing that we could implement into the tree management plan.
Not on our agenda. I think we'd have to bring it back.
No, I'm just throwing it out there as thoughts why I'm saying what I'm saying. So I would go against removal, because removal means take the whole thing out.
I second that.
Did you second the removal?
No.
Okay, well, the original motion was to remove the tree, to do what the staff report says and remove the tree.
All right.
And so you don't offer a second. Do we have a second to remove the tree?
All right, so then I will put a motion forward to, I have a motion to reduce the tree to a snag.
So, and let's discuss. So, I mean, first of all, that's not on the agenda. So I think people who knew that that was an option, might come out and argue for snag or against snag or whatever.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And so I don't think we can vote on something that's not on the agenda.
Okay, good point. So
Can I
then,
make a motion to not remove tree number 3? And potentially that's my motion, to not
Okay.
remove tree number 3.
I will second that motion. Motion, not emotion.
It's gonna be like triple negatives now.
Okay.
So if we say yes to this motion, we are voting to not remove the tree. If we vote no on this motion, then we're voting to remove we're just, oh my God.
You put a motion to save the tree, so, and I'm seconding that motion.
Actually,
Just to step in, if you don't mind.
Please.
I just want to put it out there that this tree was rated as having high risk.
Yeah.
I want to,
So I guess to break here, the point was, if we vote for removal of the tree, you're cutting it down to base, it's gone. We were thinking that the idea
And
of
replanting a tree in its place.
yes, and replanting. We were thinking the idea of a snag is good, but Commissioner Martin pointed out that that's not on the agenda. So if we chose not to do that, we'd have to wait a month to probably act on that again. And then, so the question is it so dangerous that it can't stay for another month?
I think, well, can I just say, my reasoning for saying to keep the tree or to not cut down is it's not presented as an imminent danger. It's within 3 years. We have the street management plan process coming up where I think we can talk about snags or other things. And so I would say, I don't know if we need to contextualize this, but at least not remove the tree until after the street tree management process has begun. And yeah.
I would jump in and say, since you kind of asked a direct question, that, a 3-year timeframe considers normal to, it doesn't consider extreme weather conditions. So if we were to have a wild windstorm within the next month, all bets are off. And particularly for a tree that has a failure point like this, that is something that would give me pause and would make me concerned. So if you're not going to remove it, approve it for removal tonight, at least consider that we've rated it high risk. Right? So it means that there's a very prominent point at which it could fail. And that
I have a follow-up question for that one. Is there any, you said that you used to do these crazy pruning sort of exercises. Is there one you'd recommend for this one? Not the, what was the other thing you called? Not the snag, but something.
No, like I said before, when we were talking about where the hammer is, it's the point is so low on the trunk that there's really not much that you can do in terms of crazy pruning to reduce the limbs. I mean, you really have to reduce basically in the entire tree down to a standing stump in order to rid it of the failure point.
And then unfortunately, you put this on pause to extend the meeting because it's 10:15. So I move to extend the meeting till 10:30. Is there a second?
Second it.
Roll call.
Commissioner Chang Frank?
Yes.
Commissioner Chin?
Yes.
Commissioner Martin?
Yes.
Commissioner OG?
Yes.
And Chair Kent?
Yes.
Can I make a suggestion? I think we were struggling on what sort of motion. Maybe it's a, if we want to go that way, a motion just to confirm the staff recommendation to remove the tree. If it fails, and we move on.
Wait a minute. Staff, if we approve the recommendation, then it could be removed tomorrow, so I'm not quite sure what you're saying.
And if it doesn't, it
So,
can't-
so if you deny the, if you don't approve staff recommendation, then you're saying don't remove the tree.
They'll
Yeah,
come
it's just
back,
going to stand there as is.
Right.
Yeah.
well, they'll come back with another recommendation.
And we'd be going against the staff recommendation. And it seems clear to me, I don't see how a tree management plan is going to, I mean, definitely tree management plan might help with pruning and watering trees, as the public has told us is important. We've heard is important, but I don't see how a tree management plan is going to help this tree in any way. So that's why I make a motion to remove the tree. But that's not what's on the table right now. What's on the table right now is a motion to preserve the tree, which So,
I have mixed feelings because she reminded us, and thank you for reminding us, that it's high risk. I would hate for there to be a crazy wind and have someone coming out from the church hurt. So that gives me pause. I do care about the trees, but at this point, I probably lean on safety of human beings.
Could,
I mean, I'm going to say from a church's standpoint, if that tree fell over in a windstorm tonight and y'all voted no, we would put it back on you on the city and say, look, we said it was, the staff said it was high risk and you voted no. It's not going to be on us anymore because y'all voted no. It's your liability at that point. It's the only tree we're asking for you to remove at this point. The other three we want to keep.
Makes sense. I got you.
understood. Chair Frank, do you want to
Frank, you wanna change your,
withdraw that motion so we can
change your motion?
do the other motion?
I already put the motion out there, so we can, you don't have to second, or you don't,
Yeah. Yes, nobody second. Did I second? I withdraw my second if I did. I might have. Okay. So it failed for lack of second. And you want to?
I move to remove the tree as according to the staff recommendation.
I second that.
Okay. Commissioner Chang Frank?
No.
Commissioner Chen?
Yes.
Commissioner Martin?
Yes.
Commissioner OG?
Yes.
And Chair Kent?
No.
Okay, and I move to remove the fourth tree. Is there a second? Okay, good, because I don't really want to remove it. Okay, great. So, fantastic. Thank you, public, for helping us out on this, and everyone with their input. Where are we on the agenda?
Okay, that's it. The last subcommittee, there's no subcommittee report for
No.
Flex. And then future agenda items.
So we do have thoughts about the upcoming agenda. Gosh, I hate to even say this. We're back on our normal cycle for tree removals, so we will have a couple of tree removals. We also have, we talked about the analysis we're doing on the Solano Avenue eucalyptus trees, so we're having some results, so we want to come and talk about what we're finding on Solano Avenue and start that discussion with the commission. We'll likely, Andre's not here, so I can commit him to this. We'll likely have some circling back on Prop 68 projects. That's again a pretty full agenda.
Great, fantastic.
Thank you.
Any other, commissioners want to see future agenda items?
No more future agenda items? Okay. I would have, we have the tree report tree management plan updates coming up, so that's already been mentioned. So I will conclude the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.